Ladies and gentlemen, I need to call the meeting to order, and I invite you to consider that there is overflow seating in the atrium should you wish to accommodate yourself there. And in any event, it's 7 o'clock and it is time to start the meeting. So with that, I will call the meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, we have no regrets. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Lapworth?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to maintain my declaration of pecuniary interest on item 14, which I appreciate will be heard tomorrow evening, as one of my income tax clients is an employee of the Clublink Corporation and works at Glen Abbey. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to declare a pecuniary interest, but I am going to declare an interest. I'll continue to vote on item number, I believe it's 3, with respect to Kirk Village Growth Area. I don't have a pecuniary interest because I don't own property, but I do operate a business in that area. And just for the sake of clarity, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of my interest.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, those are all that I see. Council, we need a mover and seconder to resolve in the Committee of the Whole. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Chisholm, all in favor? And that's carried. And the Committee of the Whole is a style of meeting that's less formal than council and allows us to better hear from the public. Council, the first item before us is the discussion item, the recommendation report for the former Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital lands, proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. And we have not only the comprehensive report that you've all read, but staff have a presentation, I believe. Commissioner?
On. Mayor, members of council, I just wanted to spend a moment and take you back in time to put a context around the first two items that you have on your agenda, both the former OTMH site as well as the Brentwood site. Are you getting feedback? No? Okay, I am then. So you may recall that in March of 2012, you had initiated the South Central Public Land Study. And that study looked at 4 properties, the 3 former school sites, the Lynbrook, the Brentwood, as well as the Chisholm site, and the former Oakville Trafalgar Hospital site. So the purpose of that study was threefold. The first was to ensure we accommodated our recreational needs that were coming out of our Parks and Rec Master Plan that at that time was underway. The second was to identify any other public uses that were appropriate for the community that could be accommodated on those sites. And the third was to determine what would be the preferred land use for each of the sites, taking into consideration the livable Oakville policies that you had and ensure it met the compatibility with the community. So council, the community and staff participated in quite an extensive public consultation process. We looked at preliminary options, preferred options, and finally in March of 2013, you actually considered a recommended option from staff. So at that point in time, you actually approved a scheme for the Brentwood site. First of all, I'll deal with Lynbrook. In 2013, you approved the Lynbrook option, and as you know, the Lynbrook Public School, the boys' school, is now currently on the site. You also dealt with the Chisholm, and Chisholm was to accommodate 9 residential lots on the property. You've gone through an official plan, zoning amendment, and actually even a tendering process. So that site right now is in the ownership of the private sector, and they're committed to develop that site in accordance with what council had undertaken. So in each of those 2 instances where the sites have been dealt with on the basis of your 2013 recommendations, in each case there were public lands taken off those sites to accommodate either woodlots or playground areas such as on Chisholm. So in 2013 you also gave direction on Brentwood. So Brentwood is your second item on the agenda tonight. The concept that you endorsed at that point in time was for 7 lots that would front onto Douglas, a playground area at the corner of Douglas and Palmer, and the conversion of the former or the historic part of the school to accommodate 6 to 9 apartment units within it. That was the concept that you endorsed at that point in time, and you asked staff to look at the implementation in order to realize that endorsed concept. So the staff report you have in front of you tonight, which is the second item on the agenda, is bringing forward, after further consultation with the community, an official plan and zoning amendment to implement that direction that you provided in March of 2013. The second item that you have on the agenda, or the first, I'm sorry, is the former hospital site. And at the point in March of 2013, the direction you provided was an approval in principle. You supported the use of the site for a community center, a park, and residential uses, and the preservation of the high school site, but you did defer. Okay, thank you. Okay. So on the hospital site, can you hear me? I'm very loud now. On the hospital site, you approved the overall concept of a residential, the community center, the park, and the retention of the high school site. But the question around density and types of units, you asked for that to be further considered. So finally, in June of this year, Council received a master plan then for the OTMH site itself. You endorsed a master plan for that site, and so that actually placed the community center in a specific location. It placed the park, and it showed the residential and the seniors that you'll see through the detailed. And so in June, Council endorsed that concept, or that master plan, and again directed staff to undertake the necessary work for the official plan and zoning amendment to bring back to you for your consideration. So you have two reports tonight. The very first one is the OTMH, and it is that official plan and zoning amendment that reflects the master plan that you adopted in June. And the second report is the Brentwood, which does reflect the official plan or the endorsement that you had given in March of 2013 with an official plan and a zoning amendment. So the details themselves, if we're starting with the OTMH site, the first item on the agenda, Gabe Charles was going to provide you a detailed presentation on the OTMH site, its official plan and zoning amendment, and Kate Mihaljevic will provide a more detailed presentation on the Brentwood following your deliberation on the OTMH site. So, Gabe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is the recommendation report for the former hospital site. And Commissioner stole a little bit of my thunder, but that's okay. This, in terms of the background that has we've gone through for the last 4 years. The other thing I just wanted to really reiterate in terms of the master plan was a number of the options that staff had gone through based on the planning design principles as well as the OP policy that we currently have. And with that master plan, we brought forward some draft amendments in October for that statutory meeting. And so we'd heard a couple of things through that public meeting in terms of some certainty behind how we were going to be looking at seniors housing, as well as how we were going to be assuring the council and the public of park space. So this is the master plan that council had endorsed and that we brought forward in October with the draft amendments. And so what we had heard was the civic space in front of the high school, providing some assurances that that would still be available for public parkland, as well as the open space in behind Wyndham Manor, how we were going to be enshrining that so that it would continue to be used for parkland, as well as some real parameters around the seniors-oriented housing piece. The balance of the master plan, the low-density residential, as well as the medium density, hasn't really changed at all since that statutory meeting. So to provide a little bit more detail, what we are talking about is a total of 19 single detached units on the south side of McDonald as well as on the west side of Allen Street. And then there's two orange colored blocks in the middle, which would be used for medium density residential. In this case, it would be for townhouse use. There's two blocks there where we would expect there to be 16 units total coming out of that. So as I mentioned, there was a number of things that were stated as part of the statutory public meeting. And with respect to the park space, what we have been looking to do is really ensure that we're getting almost 2 acres, 0.6 hectare of park north of the community center, the future community center. We're also looking to have a policy in place which requires the establishment of a civic space in front of the high school that's publicly accessible. The other matter is the open space in behind Wyndham, which is about an acre or so in size, and ensuring that that remains for parkland purposes. There's a number of easements and utilities throughout that particular block, so it's expected that that space would be used for just passive park space. That could be benches, could be some further landscaping, etc. At the end of last month, on the 28th, there was an open house which was specific to the park to the north of the community center up in this area in here. And there was a couple of options that had been discussed at that particular open house. Further work is being done on the design of that, with the idea that that would be under construction and available at the same time as the community center would be available. The civic space in front of the high school, the one piece about that we want to ensure is that there's a use to that space that is contiguous to that of the community center, which will be to the north. And right now we have really just illustrated as a driveway loop extending from Lawson to the parking garage. Although as part of the community center design right now to the main entrance, there's a public plaza square drop-off that's being designed as part of that. Our hope and our intent is to be able to have a design which is flexible enough, scalable enough, that we can extend that down to the high school space. It may not be exactly the same, but at least it would have the similar type of design intent, similar types of materials, that kind of thing, so that the entire space can be used as one public area. The other piece that we heard a lot about was having some more certainty behind the seniors-oriented housing. We're currently, at this point now, we've had a couple of conversations with Halton Region to try and understand if there's some interest, which the region has told us they have some interest in establishing some sort of a seniors programming on this site. The details of that are still very much in their infancy. We haven't gotten through past the initial discussion phases of what the proposed amendment could allow, which is 4 stories and medium density designation based on the size, around 35 units or so. But we've also explained that our hope and our intent is that the design of the civic space would be complementary to the high school, and we could integrate that as part of the overall seniors development. That's to say that the high school could be flexible in terms of its use. It could be for office space, could be seniors programming. It doesn't necessarily have to be for residential units, but we're continuing that particular dialogue, and in the future we'll be able to present some update to council in terms of how those discussions have gone. So in terms of what seniors housing could look like, there's a variety of examples that are in our community currently. You have a bungalow life lease type of arrangement. You have an assisted care, which the region provides on Third Line. There's the Waterford development, which is on Bronte Road. And then in the community locally is the Sunrise Assisted Care facility. Any of these types of arrangements could be possible on the former hospital site. It's not to say this is what we're expecting to see, but these are nearby examples with a similar type of height that we have proposed as through the OP policy at a maximum of 4 stories. So the schedules themselves to the official plan and what that change will look like is it's going from an institutional designation to a combination of land use designations. As I mentioned, low density residential on the south side of McDonald and on the west side of Allen. The community center and all of the park space that we know of right now in terms of north of the community center and east of Wyndham, it would be designated for parks and open space. And the future seniors area, as I mentioned, would be medium density residential. As part of that, with that designation does permit long-term care facilities. It permits retirement homes, and as I mentioned, based on the overall size that we had identified previously, it could be about 35 units if it was independent living. The other thing that we've noted in the policies is the preservation of the high school as a cultural heritage resource, as well as directing for that public space in front of the high school. With respect to the implementing zoning, the zoning categories do follow what the OP land use designations would be in terms of an RL30, which is complementary to the special provision 10 to the north and east of the site. Community use recognizes the parking garage, the future community center, as well as the park space. The O1 as well would be for the park space, which is in this location here. And we've maintained the I zone over the area that would be for the seniors in the future. Our expectation is that as that site were to come forward with a development proposal, we would be looking at that through a rezoning application, which we would then have a future public meeting and bring that forward to council through the normal Planning Act application process. So just a little bit more detail in terms of how the zoning would work on the single detached. Minimum lot frontage of 14.5, a maximum coverage of 25%, which is complementary to the SP10, which has for one-story permission of 25% for a one-story dwelling. We've introduced the idea of a minimum amount of landscaping for the front yard of 60%, as well as ensuring that from a character point of view, any development here is complementary to the area around it. So we've included a maximum garage door width of 3.5 meters. And I will note that there's a discrepancy between that and the report on page 9, which I think had 4 meters, but the bylaw that is before you tonight is for 3.5 meters in terms of that width. So should council move to approve the resolutions in front of you, the next steps would include some future work with the disposition of the actual lands in terms of how those would be divided and sold for the residential piece, as well as continuing to work with a provider for the seniors-oriented housing piece. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Seems to be a night for feedback. Are there questions from council? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Could you define a little further the process that we're going to go through in terms of deciding on a preferred model for the seniors housing that you talked about?
In terms of the process itself, right now we've had initial discussions with the region, as I mentioned. Assuming that there's a little bit more traction to that, we would be coming back to council most likely with some sort of a memorandum of understanding to identify what the roles would be for the region or with the town and with the town, and really try to understand what it is the programming that the region would be looking at. My hope would be that there would be the typical type of Planning Act application process wherein we would have a pre-consultation, there would be community meeting, there'd be a statutory public meeting before council makes any sort of decisions.
And that would be for both the old OTHS property as well as any possible build adjacent or behind it? It
Yes.
would be looked at together?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, the way the policy, the policy that we have presented to council is to look at that entire space comprehensively.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm not sure, Gabe, if this is to you, but I'm just wondering about the financial aspect of this proposal in terms of how it's being funded and where the funding comes from and the manner with which those homes play into the funding on that property, how it was purchased, et cetera. Is that for you? Can you maybe explain a little bit to me about that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The overall development of the site of, I'm going to separate out the community center. The community center is funded from the town's capital reserves and in part from the development charges. The balance of the site is funded in the interim and reserves, and then we'll go through a tendering process in order to, very similar to the Brentwood process, to look at potential buyers, shortlist those buyers to ensure that the town retains as much as possible, really retains all of its certainty in terms of how the development will occur.
So what is our obligations in terms of paying back those reserves, or where does that funding come from to refund the reserves once we take the money out of there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the overall objective of the study was to look at how we could accommodate the best public uses on a site, but it also was to look at opportunities to maximize the revenue from that site, really to replenish our capital reserves, so the many projects that the town wants to do, they can accomplish through our capital reserves.
So those capital reserves to pay for this and to do the work that we're talking about tonight came from reserves from across the town, and the idea is to sort of flow back what we can in order to reinvest in other places throughout the town as well. Is that correct?
That's right. It's been a town-wide funding.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Others? Councillor Elgar?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. A question, you mentioned development charges. What percentage is going from development charges for this project?
So it's about a 1/3 or 33% to the community center. It would be development charge funding. That's right.
I don't see any other councillors with questions, so Madam Clerk, maybe you could call the registered delegations. After the registered delegations, I'll poll the audience to see if anybody else has thought of anything else to say.
The first delegation is Peter DeRosa on behalf of the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association.
Welcome, Mr. DeRosa. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Your Worship, Mayor Burton, councillors, members of the community, and town staff. My name is Peter DeRosa, President at Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association. I'm pleased to be here to represent our views tonight. Our community, as well as the TCRA, are anxious to enjoy the benefits of the much-needed community center and its parklands. First, let me say that we are delighted with the concept drawings we recently had an opportunity to view, and excited that the plans are proceeding to meet the 2020 deadlines for the community center. We congratulate council and staff on a job well done and appreciate the ongoing public consultation that continues to take place. We hope that you will be considerate of our remarks today, as you have been in the past. With respect to agenda item number 1, redevelopment of former hospital site and old OT High School building. As the town moves forward with the plans to construct a community center, it is worth pausing to recognize and celebrate this major investment from the town. It is great to see the integrative approach utilized for the existing green space areas on the lands, and we ask that this approach be continued with the parklands contemplated south of the community center as well. We ask that the civic space in the front of the OTHS be landscaped and included in current landscaper scope consistent with this approach. Also, we request that the access from the parking garage to the community center should be weatherproofed to mitigate inclement cold weather. We would like also to suggest that the fire access requirements to the northeast corner of the Wyndham Manor could be provided from Allen Street just further to the north, parallel to Shedden Avenue, thus freeing up park space and providing a link to the community center from the center and civic space. With respect to item number 2, Brantwood School Grounds, the proposed amendments of the official plan zoning bylaws allow for development 7 detached homes fronting Douglas Avenue, currently the Brantwood Playground, a parkette at the corner of the Douglas and Palmer Avenue as children playground, and the conversion of the former school built into 4 to 9 residential units. TCRA is aware of the efforts by some local residents to retain all or some of the Brantwood School lands bordering on Douglas as green space. At the November 8, 2017 TCRA board meeting, the board unanimously passed the following resolution that reaffirms TCRA's support for the redevelopment of the hospital lands and the construction of the community center while maximizing green space. The actual motion passed was as follows. TCRA strongly supports the town's proposal to build a community center on the old hospital lands and to redevelop the hospital lands for community and residential purposes. TCRA further expresses the appreciation to Council for this significant investment and contribution to the Southeast Oakville community. Item 2, TCRA recognizes that town needs revenues from the sale of lands at both the hospital lands and at the Brantwood School. We request that as much existing green space as possible be retained by the town at the Brantwood School site. Thank you for your opportunity to address Council. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. It looks like you have at least one or two. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Thanks for coming out, Mr. DeRosa. A couple of questions for you. Just want to make sure I have these captured. Your concern about the civic space in front of the former OTHS. Like to see it a mix of green and concrete or less concrete? Just
we would like it. I mean, there's no plans at the moment for that piece of property to be included in the landscaper's scope. We'd like it connected to the rest of the green spaces that are being contemplated for the north.
Fair enough. And the second one makes sense to, in the climate in which we live, to have some protection, if we can look at that.
Mm-hmm.
The third item, on the on the east side of Wyndham Manor, you're referring to the diagonal walkway emergency vehicle access that goes across it diagonally, and you'd like to see that perpendicular to Allen Street, or at a right angle to Allen Street? Am I capturing that
I
correctly?
understand right now that, as you can see, and I apologize for the...
Props, perfect.
As I understand right now, the design is to have the fire escape diagonal, so it essentially breaks up the property in two.
All right, so at the top,
The recommendation is you move it a little further up north, like that you have the opportunity to join the green space as one piece.
all right, and your other point was to maximize the green space on Brantwood.
Right.
Thank you very much, and Mr. Mayor, at the appropriate time, I'll move receipt and include a motion to capture some of those items.
Thank you, Councillor. I thought I saw Councillor Adams is next.
Thank you very much for your delegation and your material. On the school site and on the hospital lands combined, are you satisfied with the overall amount of green space that's being protected?
On the hospital site?
So when you combine it all, are you satisfied with how council has got it all put together?
Yes, but we must also recognize that there is a movement locally to try to maximize as much green space as possible on the Brantwood School. So the ask is, we're asking council and staff to consider whether there's any additional space that can be provided for.
So given our financial needs, are you satisfied with the combination that we've got between the two? I'm asking this gentleman.
You know, I think if you, generally speaking, we were pretty clear that we would like to see an effort made in providing a little bit more additional green space. If you poll the audience and ask each individual in this audience, everybody will give you a separate opinion as to how much is appropriate. What we're really asking is for council to consider the request and for staff to consider the request. That's all.
Thank you.
Councillor Hutchins.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for coming out. Green space, once it's gone, and you don't get it back. So my question to you is on this green space, how much extra are the people looking for? I mean, 5 lots, absolutely no.
As I said,
but 1, 2, is that what you're looking for?
The request is for you to consider additional space, whatever that might be appropriate. There are some people in this room that we have varying opinions as to how many lots. And is expressing it into number of lots the right way to approach this? I think this is a question that needs to be considered by staff within the context of the request. If it's possible and maximizing a little bit more space, that would be greatly appreciated by the community. I don't know whether it's 1 lot, 2 lots, 3 lots. It's not for us to really determine that.
Councillor Elgar.
Thanks for coming. Okay, I hear what you're saying, as much as possible. How flexible are you on height? Save more lots, save more green space, go higher.
Well, I think the town is considering height restrictions.
But if we change that, like,
as we
nothing's been
speak.
approved yet, we could change that tonight, if you want more height, maybe, and to give more lots, more green space. Would you be in favor of that?
I'd have to take it back to the board, to tell you the truth, once I have something concrete in the front of me. My personal views, I mean, we can talk about that all night, but it's
Yeah.
not my personal views that prevail here. These are considerations that have to be taken by the board when they have something in the front of them, and then debated and represented appropriately.
Okay, I thank you.
I think that concludes the questions. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
bringing your information.
Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Janet Haslett-Thiel from Joshua Creek Residents Association.
Welcome, Ms. Haslett-Thiel. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, council members, and community. My name is Janet Haslett-Thiel, and I am here tonight on behalf of the Joshua Creek Residents Association in regards to the redevelopment of the former hospital lands. Let me begin by expressing our continued thanks for the town's unanimous support for the development of a multi-generational community center on the former hospital lands. On November 28th, residents who attended the parks consultation received an update on the progress of the architect and the town team, and we are all very excited to see the full plan in the new year. Tonight, with the zoning amendments for the lands, you help us continue on a journey, and it has been a bit of a long one, of creating this great community hub in 2020. In regards to the town's staff report tonight, we acknowledge that the staff have provided more definition on the different development options for the seniors area and trust that any proposed development application will be widely communicated for community input and will conform to height and density allowances. We appreciate that the town continues to include a civic square in front of the old Oakville Trafalgar High School as part of the land development and would require a new land order to, quote, create an accessible public space, unquote. But frankly, what does that mean? What does that look like? Will it be a vibrant, active space or a more passive green space? How will the entry to the old OT High School and seniors housing be developed while protecting the urban square space that you approved at council? Given that the devil is always in the details, we are asking that Town Council direct staff to broaden the hospital lands park consultation to include the civic urban square. This more integrated approach will provide several benefits. One, the design options will be developed that are truly complementary to the overall site development with resident input. Two, the different amenities that are being considered for the different park spaces can factor in what would be at the Civic Square area. 3, they will show walking connections from one area to another on the lands. 4, the developer will know the vision of how this land that fronts onto Old OT must be developed. No surprises for any of us. And 5, the entry into the seniors area will be better defined to ensure safe entry and exit. In summary, we support the town staff's zoning changes, but ask that council direct town parks staff to develop design options for the Civic Square as part of an integrated parks consultation. This will provide greater certainty to residents that the vision for the Civic Square will not be undermined by a developer. The Southeast Oakville Community Center project has been an object lesson in how to integrate the input from the community into long-term planning for a much-needed community hub. We look forward to continuing to work with town staff on the development of the former hospital lands as it moves forward and the design and scheduling details become more solidified. Thank you for your attention tonight.
Thank you for your information. Councillor Hutchins has a question for you, and he may not be the only one. Councillor Giddings as well. Councillor Hutchins.
Hi, Janet. Thank you very much for coming. In the Civic Square, would you be, are you asking town to develop a specific design for that? Makes it difficult to sell that area as part of the seniors thing if the town already decides what happens on it. Would it be better in your mind to be able to hide that off, that just the Civic Square, and sell just the rest of it rather than sell everything?
Okay, well, let me answer your questions in two parts. First, if people had their choice, I think they would love for it to stay in the public hands, but I understand that that is an option the council has already considered and has not gone with. It is a little concerning on the map that Mr. Gabe put up that they have not actually marked the Civic Square as green space or open space. So to your point, yes, it would give us greater comfort. And remind me about the third point.
No, I was just thinking if there's so much wariness in the downtown area about this area not being available to the public, despite what Mayor Burton has said that it will be, to hive this off so this area doesn't get sold whilst the rest of it does for the seniors.
Well, our ask tonight is that it be an integrated approach. And if it's going to stay and go to a private land developer, if I were giving advice to that developer, I'd want some transparency on what the town would require me to do with the front of Old OT. And so if there's an integrated approach to how the parks are designed, and they're given some options, and I'm not saying that it would have to be absolutely identical, but if they're given some options which the community has had some input on, consistent with how the north part of the community center is and the other open spaces, including Wallace Park and Brantwood, that makes the most sense to me. And you've worked hard to have an integrated approach on everything. So to me, it's as simple as give them a plan and tell them, if you want to buy this, this is what that front space needs to include, and it needs to be complementary to the rest of the land. And I do want to point out that there was the word, we hope that the developer, and I don't want to pick on Gabe because he does a great job on behalf of the town, but I don't want to hope. I want it in writing and I want it clear.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Green and Madam Commissioner, what kind of clarity could you bring to this point?
Sorry. Mayor and members of council, in a large part, I think we would agree with the delegation, and in part because the Civic Square at the front is intended to be in private ownership in the longer term, but through the official plan, it will be designed as a passive open space. It will be publicly accessible. And as part of the work that's going on with the community center, we're looking at how the front part of the community center is designed, and those similar design principles or criteria need to be drawn down into the space at the front of the high school site, the former high school site. So the integration is very, very important. Presenting specific options on the site in terms of what it actually has to look like gets into a bit of a challenge, because we don't know yet how that high school site's going to be used. So what type of access, how the access needs to come into that. And that's the integration piece that we don't quite know yet. So what we expect to happen, because the town owns the site. We have all the ability to not just hope, but to guarantee the design of that front space. Is to make sure we understand what happens on the high school site so we can integrate that into the civic square and make sure that the principles that are in the community center square at the front of that are integrated down into the front of the high school site. So I think we're in agreement, and we have the opportunities, the town certainly does, because one, it's in the Heritage District. There'll be a heritage permit that needs to be issued for the high school site that will deal with the whole front of the square itself. The official plan requires that that space be publicly accessible and a park as well. And in addition, the town owns the lands and has the ability through a purchase and sale agreement to secure all of those things and provide the certainty for the park itself.
And do you have any trouble with the suggestion that the Civic Square be included in the design work that the delegate referenced? Perhaps Mr. Green is ready to provide some information here. One or the other of you.
Mayor Burton, first of all, with respect to the old high school and Civic Square, if the town decides through its sale or prospective buyers that in fact we're not getting the type of product, that can be removed as part of the offering. There's no reason that the town has to sell it. However, we have on a number of occasions when we've gone out for RFPs, we have detailed a minimum design that anybody looking at must meet. I guess we could look at doing that, which says, here's sort of the lower deck that one would have to design to, and any offering that's better than that is what we'd be expecting. So we could look at doing that as part of the criteria in a tender or an RFP.
And let's just speak about the motivation for the concept that down the road it would be in private ownership. Is that because you wish to move the cost of building it and maintaining it onto the private sector? Is that the reason for that?
Well, I think it certainly is part of that motivation. I mean, if that cost can be carried on by a third party, that is always a good thing in times of tighter dollars, but also it allows it to be integrated so that you've got the old high school and the new seniors building, if that's what finally gets built there, would all be integrated together as one complete development site.
But I want to pursue with you the tantalizing little idea you put out that it doesn't have to be in private ownership. Does that mean that in theory, bidders could be asked to pay for the construction and landscaping of the Civic Square even as the town continued to own it?
But potentially that could be one of the options. I think, though, that we see the ability to use that space and function as what appears and functions as a public space as certainly a viable option. For the development community, it's what a lot of park space is moving to in a lot of urban areas. So it allows you to have it read and appear as a public space, but still in private ownership, so that the long-term maintenance of that space can be maintained by the private sector.
Ms. Azathiel, having heard that, do you have any further thoughts on this point?
Sounds to me like there's an option to keep it in public hands. That would be awesome. But the second part sounds like we should allow the architect, the landscape architect, to include it in the parks consultation, because it's not going to be that significantly more expensive to ensure that we see some complementary designs.
All right, any other questions from Ms. Azathiel? Councillor Giddings.
You mentioned that it's been a long time. I think you and I have been working on this for over 6 years, along with the other residents' associations that are here. So I just want to thank you for your ongoing focus and tenacity on behalf of your own RA and indeed all of Southeast Oakville. Your efforts are appreciated, and I'd like to thank everyone that's come out tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Giddings.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
That's our last listed delegation.
I promised to poll the audience in case any new thoughts had occurred to anybody. Ms. Morowitz, please come forward and share your information. Welcome. We look forward to your information.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's nice to be back. I'm here once again on behalf of the Chartwell Maple Grove Residents Association, which has been intimately involved in the process leading to tonight since 2012 and the preliminary beginnings of the South Central Public Land Study. It has been a long...
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but
microphone.
I can hear you, but because you're off mic, I'm worried
Sorry.
that others may not.
I know. So I was late coming in and not thinking. Okay. Should I start again, or is it better to... Anyway. You okay? All right. You know who I am. I've been here before. Anyway, it has been a long and sometimes arduous journey, but we are so very grateful to Your Worship for your leadership on this project and to all the councillors, past and present, whose vision and fairness have gotten us to where we are today. Planning for our first Ward 3 multi-generational community centre, your efforts on behalf of our community have not gone unnoticed or unappreciated, sorry. We also commend town staff for their diligence, thoroughness, and unending patience with all the public consultation that has been incorporated into this project thus far. We are getting this done together. We support the proposed zoning changes presented in the report before Council and look forward to seeing this project move forward as scheduled. We also ask that Council consider more specific definitions for the proposed civic square as outlined in the previous presentation by Joshua Creek Residents Association. And in addition, this is a bit of a sideline, but we ask that the park development vision for all public areas on this site be officially integrated with any potential changes to Wallace Park. These spaces should likely serve different purposes, but be linked with logical and easy access for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't realize that was the end.
It's a short one.
I was writing down what you said, and I thought, oh my God, she stopped. Councillor Hutchins?
Yes, hi Danny. Thank you very much for coming out. It has been a very long road for us all. You're talking about linking up the hospital park area or open spaces past the recreational centre down to Wallace Park. What about across to the parkette that's Brantwood as well?
Brantwood is, just looking at this as an overall thing from when this started as part of the South Central Public Land Study, there were 3 schools that were part of that study and what was decided to happen with those schools, whatever has happened. And it's really, I don't feel it is within my venue or our venue as CMGRA to comment on Brantwood. It's not our turf, if you want to put it that way. When we were dealing with Lynbrook, we dealt with Lynbrook, and when JCR was dealing with Chisholm, they dealt with Chisholm. Brantwood, I know, is quite controversial, and I certainly would say that as far as all residents of Oakville are interested in preserving green space. But as far as taking a position one way or another, it's really not for me to say, or not for us to say.
Well, I wasn't asking you to take a position. I was just asking you that linking. You were
The
asking
linking
for a link
makes sense,
between
but
one
I-
to the other to the other.
If whatever is decided with what happens on Brantwood, obviously the use and purpose of all the green space should be integrated. So whether one's passive, one's active, one's reflective, one's whatever. But I'd just like to see, this comes from a little bit of the Parks and Rec consultation that's been going on, that we're looking at the hospital in isolation. And I think that limits what people think they should be asking for. If you're not looking at all that public space, knowing that possibly there are some changes possibly coming to Wallace Park, that should be part of this process as well.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Danny, just a one quick question with respect to saying integration. And when I look at Wallace Park, the potential of Wallace Park for development, whatever passive or active, whatever we come up with eventually, but there is a barrier of when you say integrated because we got Shedden Avenue there. Do you have any ideas with respect to how to interconnect that with the hospital site with respect to Wallace Park?
I am not a parks designer by any stretch of the imagination. My background is completely different. But I would say by adding sidewalks, making the ability for people to transit the roads safely, whether that involves putting in stop signs and braking traffic. I'm sure that the town and town staff are perfectly capable of thinking of great ways to do that. But I think my point was more that when you come to the uses of the open space, that Wallace Park really needs to be part of the equation.
I would tend to agree with you. So the suggestion is above and beyond just the development within the framework of the hospital site in Wallace Park, there is added costs or development processes which should be in place with respect to transfer of our pedestrians or our park goers to get to one location to another with ease without any fear of getting hit by a car or whatever the case may be. So is it safe to assume that what you're asking for is to look at an integration on a physical side of it too?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Thank you very much, Ms. Morowitz, for, oh, sorry, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks so much for coming out. If I could perhaps ask staff for some clarification, further Councillor Chisholm, about the integrated process. We've had a series of public meetings, and one of the things obviously that's been looked at, and a number of this people in the room have provided input on, is what amenities go to which space. What is it, the civic space? What's adjacent to the community center? What's at Wallace Park, the Brantwood Parkette, down to Georgia Square? And so you mentioned you aren't a park planner, so you'll leave that to your fellow residents with input as required from your residents association and our staff?
Absolutely. We're certainly encouraging our residents as well to have input into what they'd like to see happening. But the public input portion does pertain only to the hospital lands parkland, and that, in my mind, is limiting. And also, I think, could possibly skew requests results because we're not looking at the space
in
as a whole.
totality.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Morowitz, for your information. Mr. Green, I think the public would like to know from staff what your style of consultation is for the redevelopment of park areas. Are we going to do this in a comprehensive way, and are we going to do it in unrelated ways? How exactly are you proceeding?
Through you, Mayor Burton, in discussions with Commissioner Bell and Mr. Mark, the Director of Parks and Open Space. They are actually looking at all of the parks in that general area, starting right up at the top end where you have the sports park, going right down through Georgia Square and the linkage, and what opportunities in each of the parks out there. So it's a comprehensive plan that they will be putting together.
And will it have public consultation?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I hope that's of some help to the concern. Madam Clerk, the next delegation. Oh, I'm still polling. Has anyone else been moved to bring additional information to council on the matter? All right, I will confine it to table. Councillor Chisholm.
Mr. Green, I just kind of twigged on with respect to Wallace Park in relation to Brantwood School site. Can we have consideration what the distance is from that park to Wallace Park with respect to the meters? Do we have, I don't want to put you on the spot tonight, but the consideration for that?
Certainly they'll look at all the linkages, the distances, what goes in what park. That, as you know, I think it's 800 meters for certain playgrounds, things like that. So that'll all be taken into account.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to move receipt of item number 1 on this evening's agenda. And I have a motion that I would like to have included with that, if I may.
So you have a motion in front of you, a recommendation. Part 1 is that the town-initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendments be approved. Are you moving that?
Well, what I'd like to do is tie in some of the comments from the delegations that were here this evening, just to be included in that so we can move forward and provide feedback and some further details as we go through the process.
So help me help you, help me understand what outcome you're trying to achieve here.
Well, if it please the mayor, could I read my motion?
Yes, that'd be very good.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Given the efforts of staff in integrating the various open spaces between Cornwall Road and George's Square, and that the proposed Civic Square is not formally in the scope of this process, that Council direct staff to include the open area in front of the former OTHS building as an integral part of the hospital land redevelopment, and to develop design criteria that includes the maximization of green space. Further, that an entrance concept which would provide covered connectivity directly from the parking garage to an entrance to the Southeast Oakville Community Centre be developed for consideration, and that in conjunction with the redesign of the open area to the east of Wyndham Manor, that consideration be given to maximize green space via consideration of alternate emergency vehicle access off of Reynolds or via a 90-degree roadway off of Allen Street. And those were all items that were discussed this evening.
Those are great, but how do we deal with the rest of the business, the amendments, all of which I think are required in order to get the community center built on time?
It's part of the process that we're going through now in terms of that work that's being completed. So looking for a little further detail as mentioned, and move the report and include that in the process.
I didn't quite understand what you meant.
All right, we're moving forward with item number 1 so we can get it done on time. There's further work that has to be done on those 3 areas. It could, the emergency area could be done at site plan, I suppose.
So all of the things that I would support all of the extras that you're asking for.
Thank you.
None of them contradict adopting the recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Correct.
In my opinion. And that's why I was asking, are you moving 1, 2, 3, and 4 and your additional items?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am.
You are? Oh.
Yes.
And it's seconded by Councillor Hutchins?
It is. Thanks for your assistance in getting there.
And a little order, the good news or bad news, depending on your preferences, in committee of the whole, we don't have seconders, but we know the sentiment is there. Councillor O'Meara.
Your Worship, I'm just wondering if we could see those the extras somewhere so I can take a little look, and I might ask staff for clarification, because I believe I heard the commissioner talk about the problem with putting a specific plan on the civic space in front is we don't know how the high school is going to be used. We don't know where the entrances are going to be going, or we don't know those things. So I'm curious as to the further recommendations that Councillor Ginning has put up and how that's going to play into what I heard from the commissioner earlier.
When we get it up on the screen, you'll see that his item does not impose a plan, it develops it.
Okay.
And takes care of the desire for consultation.
Okay.
We'll see when we have it in front of us, but I think your concern is premature.
Thank you.
Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, Worship. In order to assist my colleague, Councillor Giddings, he's got it on his handheld. Is there a way we can get it on the screen?
It's now on all of your PDAs.
No, I know, but we need it for the public.
Councillor Giddings, we can take a minute for someone to write it out on the form that sits there on your desk. Perhaps the clerk would accommodate us. It won't take that long. It's worth the effort. Councillor Elgar.
So yeah, okay, just to be clear, so we are actually approving it tonight so that they can start, wait a minute, they got it up?
Give it a second, it might work.
All right, are we
Okay,
ever
let's have a look.
high-tech now? Yes, Councillor Elgar.
Well, no. I just want to hear what Councillor Gettys, because I have no problem approving it, but and he's not saying we're going to do all these things, but staff will look at doing these things, correct?
Yeah.
Fine, I'm fine with this.
Well, Madam Clerk, I want to congratulate you on your quick thinking. You got out of handwriting that out. Very good. And I got to say, even I can read it. So we have a new use for smartphones. All right, is there, Councillor Adams?
Can we scroll up? Because I think there's more. And I
Chris,
think he has to
can you-
bring some eggs home on the way home, too.
Chris, can you scroll it a little bit?
If we can just go back to the wording, I'd just like to hear from staff, because are we telling the staff they have to, if you scroll up again? If you don't mind, thank you. That council directs staff to include the open area in front of the former OTHS building as an integral part. Are we telling them they have to? We're directing them. Now, I'd like to hear what staff's comment would be on that. I don't mind looking at it, but if they come up with something better, then I'm worried.
I need a mic. In plain English, all this means is to include it as part of the design of the overall thing and to develop design criteria that include maximization of green space. So the answer to your question is no, not exactly. And yes, it's a develop rather than do.
My concern is the word direct. I'm sorry. I don't like that word, because to me, we are directing staff. And I'd like to hear staff's comment on that, Your Worship.
All right. Mr. Green?
What I'm simply taking here is instructions from council that through a public process, they want us to look at developing the criteria that would integrate the civic square and other elements down there into the overall plan. From a staff point of view, Ms. Closey and I have been talking about,
In
word
English,
direct is not offensive to staff, put it that way.
Because I noticed that Mr. Green said to look at, direct staff to look at. I didn't hear, I don't see that in the words here. But I heard what he said.
so let's read it together. The council directs staff to include the open area in front of the former OTHS building as an integral part of the hospital lands redevelopment and to develop design criteria. So let's break it apart. So we have one verb, direct, with two objects, and the second object is to develop design criteria. I think we're all okay with that, right? Like, I don't know any other way to do that than to say direct them to develop design criteria, right?
I'm just trying to figure out, Mayor Burton, why Mr. Green said direct staff to look at.
Because that's the way it feels when you read it. The other, pardon?
Then let's put those words in, exactly what Mr. Green said. Direct staff to look at.
Well, let's let the mover of the motion.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
The mover of the motion can hear your objection, but it really is up to him to decide what to do with it.
I agree, absolutely.
Councillor Gettings, would you like your smartphone back? Or are you content with your language?
I think it's clear. We aren't asking it to be built. We're saying, come back with some ideas that take into account a number of the speakers that were here this evening. I'm happy the way it stands.
Any others? Shall I call the vote? Councillor Duddick.
Your Worship, I hear what Councillor Elgar is saying. Is there any problem with saying consideration or something implying there's a process by which it'll go through? Because what I heard from CAO Green confirms what I thought was going to intend to happen. But when you read the words, people, I just don't want anyone to have a misunderstanding is all.
Councillor Giddings?
I don't understand Councillor Elgar's concern over it. There's nothing untoward here. We're asking staff to continue their good work and to come back in a manner to address some of the concerns that were raised tonight and that would make the community centre a better location and for all its users and for the public.
Commissioner.
First of all, staff understand what this recommendation is, but for clarity, you may want to say that the council directs staff to include the open space area in front of the former OTMH building as an integral part in the consultation process of the hospital lands redevelopment and to develop criteria and so on.
Mr. Mayor, if that will assist my council colleague, I'd be happy with that.
Let me ask the $64 million question. Shall I call the vote? Sure. All those in favor?
Recorded vote.
All those who wish to be registered in support of the motion, please rise to be named. That would be Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Meara, and Mayor Burton. I declare the motion carried unanimously. We now get to turn to item number 2. And if you give your attention to Kate Mihaljevic, whose name I probably just mangled.
Kate works just fine, Mr. Mayor.
I came as close as I could.
That's great.
She will take us through the report.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Good evening, members of council. Tonight before you, we have the application town-initiated official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 221 Allen Street. This is the former Brantwood Public School. This report can be found on pages 37 through to 66 on tonight's agenda. As has been previously highlighted, the property is located within the Ward 3 area at the intersection of Palmer Avenue, Allen Street, and also has frontage onto Douglas Avenue. It was indicated earlier, the question around the proximity of the Wallace Park to the site. And if I may, this is Wallace Park. And this is the subject site with the proposed park space in this corner here. I don't have an exact measurement of distance, but I trust that this provides some understanding of proximity between the two. As Ms. Clohessy had indicated earlier, the property is approximately 0.9 hectares in size and includes the front portion of the school, Brantwood School, which is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, as it is part of the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District. And the school was opened in 1920 and operated for 90 years and was expanded a number of times until its closure in June of 2010. Following that, the town purchased the property in April of 2012 to give greater certainty over the development and the future land uses of the property. At the public meeting that was held on October 5th, there were a number of delegates that spoke about their concerns regarding green space and demographics in the area, as well as the playground structure that is currently on the property. As indicated in more detail in the report, the area defined as the neighborhood, the Brantwood Survey, which includes 4 neighborhood parks and 1 community park, totaling 10.93 hectares in size and having a variety of amenities throughout each of these parks. The proposed park space, together with the park space proposed on the former hospital site, will provide an addition of 1.25 hectares of active park space to the area. Staff have also reviewed the population data from the 2006, 2011, and the 2016 census, and did a comparative analysis of the changes in families and populations in the Southeast Oakville area, as well as the area surrounding the site. The data suggests that there is a downward trend in the number of families within this area, and further, that there are fewer younger children between the ages of 0 and 14 years of age, with an increase in the number of seniors between the ages of 65 and over. Finally, as demonstrated in the report, the proposed park space provides ample area for the existing playground structure to be relocated, as well as some passive uses as well. To implement the council-endorsed development concept, the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are required to establish the appropriate land use designation and regulations. The property is currently designated low-density residential, and the proposed official plan amendment would maintain the low-density residential designation on the portion of the lands adjacent to Douglas Avenue for the future residential lots, and apply a parks and open space designation on the portion to be retained by the town for the relocated playground structure. It will also apply the medium-density residential designation to the portion of the former school building that will remain in order for it to be retained and converted to multiple dwellings of 4 to 9 units. The property is currently zoned CU, or community use, within the zoning bylaw 2014-014. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would apply 3 different zoning categories to each of the land uses, and a special provision is also proposed for the residential portions of the site to recognize the location of the existing school and to reflect the streetscapes character of Douglas Avenue. The playground will not require any special provisions and will be zoned O1, which is a park zone. For additional detail in the specific provisions, in order to enable the council-endorsed redevelopment option and reflect the character of the surrounding neighborhood, the surrounding area to the northeast and south of the site is within the RL3-0 zone and is subject to a special provision number 10. These zoning regulations apply to the majority of the Brantwood Survey area, which stretches as far north as Cornwall Road, south to Lakeshore Road East, west to Allen Street, and east to Gloucester Avenue. Special Provision 10 includes regulations that were introduced under the former zoning bylaw. For the new lots on Douglas Avenue, the proposed amendment seeks to apply a modified RL3-0 zoning, which is based on Special Provision 10, but enhanced to better reflect the development concept as well as ensure that new development is reflective of the character within the neighborhood. The minimum lot frontage reflects the lotting fabric that was provided by the original registered plan of subdivision for the area. The maximum lot coverage provides for a maximum footprint for all of the lots, regardless of the area, to ensure that the smaller lots that abut the school provide for a dwelling that is of a similar size to the lots that are to the north. Landscaping, garage doors, and garage door width also ensure the character of the area is maintained, and other such provisions such as setbacks and garage floor area will be consistent with the Special Provision 10 as currently applicable. For the former school site, for the school conversion, the special provision will require the RM4 zone, which is intended to address the location of the existing building and to regulate the maximum number of units that will be contained in the former school site. A provision for a landscape buffer was also included to address the existing access that is currently close to the property line. If approved tonight, the next stages of the request for proposal will be initiated by staff. The creation of the lots will occur by a reference plan, and each of the lots will be subject to site plan approval in accordance with the site plan control bylaw. Through the site plan process, the development will be evaluated for grading, drainage, driveway locations, tree protection, and design. The 2013 arborist report that was prepared for the South Central Public Land Use Study will be updated as well. In conclusion, the recommendation before you this evening is to approve the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments and pass the associated bylaws. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Let's see how many you got. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate your presentation. You talk about the zoning that is in place there, and that's to mirror the rest of the area, I take it? So while it's new construction, the lots are the same size, it'll have the same look and feel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillors, the intent was to provide for a lotting fabric that was consistent with the original Brantwood survey, which actually sees a lot size or lot width of 14.5 meters. These were about 45-foot lots in general, so we're trying to recapture that. Additionally, in terms of the lot coverage, landscaping, and the garage door width, these are all components that are reflective of the character that is established within the Brantwood area. Namely, for lot coverage, a thorough assessment was done of the entire Brantwood area that took into consideration dwellings that were legal non-compliant, as well as new construction and any minor variances that had been contemplated through this area. And it was determined in this case that the average two-story dwelling had approximately 25% lot coverage. The number that you see here of 158 square meters is a reflection of that 25% lot coverage, but we've provided it in the form of an accurate number because the dwellings that would back onto the Brantwood School are not the full depth as the properties to the north. In order to provide for a consistent built form, we've established an exact number rather than a percentage in this case.
I appreciate the detail. What are we able to offer the residents in the neighborhood that the zoning that, if passed, will go through this evening, that we won't get marched off to the Committee of Adjustment or the OMB? What certainty can we offer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, as I mentioned, the process for developing these lots are going to be subject to a site plan application approval, which will evaluate all manner of criteria, including the design, the orientation, and the siting of the building, and of course be assessed with the applicable zoning regulations. I can't guarantee that someone won't come forward, but there are a number of processes and steps that we have in place to ensure that we are getting what we expect to see as part of this site-specific zoning. I think Jane was
Madam Commissioner.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in addition to all of the things that Kate has set out in terms of the planning requirements, the town does own the lands. We have placed in our sales agreements on other sites, such as the Chisholm site, requirements that the property be developed in accordance with what is in front of council tonight or whatever council approves, and that the opportunity for variances or substantially changing the plan is just not an option in terms of the sale agreement. So in addition to the planning, there is the sales component with town's ownership that helps secure what you approve tonight won't be changed later through another process.
I appreciate that very much. We spent a few hours down there this morning, and I was reminded about the size of the trees lining Douglas. You talked about the 2013 arborist report and the ability to look at driveway locations. Would that include services? Just thinking, are we able to have the driveway in a position where the services, as they can't cross lot lines, to make sure that we save those trees along Douglas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the expectation is that the comprehensive review of the site plan application would include looking at where the siting of services would be and providing those services in a manner which would mitigate any negative impacts on the existing tree canopy and the existing trees that are there. Similarly, for driveway location and driveway widths would also follow that same exercise.
I appreciate that very much, and this may be a question better asked to the Commissioner. I'm just curious about the sale process. It'll come through in due time. And this is tied to the former Brantwood property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is tied to the Brentwood site. We are actually in the middle of a procurement process where we have gone out and qualified specific bidders for this site, and it includes the entire property, including the school site as well.
Councillor Hutchins?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Brantwood School, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the front that is in the heritage part, but not the back part.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are correct. If I can direct you to this slide here, the boundary of the Heritage District is essentially down the middle of the site. The school itself received a later addition that included the gymnasium at the back portion, which would be closer to Douglas Avenue. Through the process, it's expected that that back portion would be demolished and the former or original portion of the school building, which is the oldest part of the school, is what's intended to be preserved. Through this exercise, it was understood that through a Ontario Building Code compliancy issue, that line had to shift a little bit further to Douglas, that rear lot line, in order to accommodate adequate separation. And that's why you're seeing that configuration you're seeing there today.
Okay, well, thank you. I was really having a thought from Councillor Elgar, who asked the question, if you go up, can you save more green space? Obviously, being heritage, the front part of the school cannot be changed. But is there any opportunity for going up further elsewhere?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was a heritage review that had been completed as initially part of the Brantwood review earlier on, and I believe that it had been determined that the building and its capacity could accommodate 4 to 9 units within the existing structure itself. It did not anticipate, to my knowledge, and I'll defer to Jane if there was anything beyond that, but I believe it facilitated what was initially assessed.
Kate, you might want to point out the overall boundaries of the Heritage District, which I think would assist the councillor in understanding the limits on height.
So, if I may, this is probably the better orientation. The Heritage District follows this rear property line all the way through the site. So if you were to draw an invisible line from here all the way down, it's the older portion of the school that's in the Heritage District, not the back portion of the school.
How far west does the district go?
To my knowledge, this is the limit. In this particular location.
Madam Commissioner, maybe you want to step in here. The district, I think, encompasses the hospital, am I right?
Sorry, further west. My apologies, I thought you meant east. No, it does go further west.
I think it might go all the way to the creek.
Yes.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but north and south, what I'm driving at is that the hospital lands, which are the other area under consideration for development, are in the district. That's all I wanted to offer. I wanted to affirm that it's in the district. I'm trying to suggest gently, there is no opportunity for height. That was my point.
Thank you.
And Diane, thank you for coming to the rescue.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, my apologies, I got my bearings all confused. The district in this particular area does go as far west as the creek, and it travel from Reynolds Street would travel further north and encompasses all the way up to just shy of Englehart in that area. It's a little bit jagged up that way, but yes, it includes the hospital as well, to your point.
That was the only piece I wanted to establish for everybody's benefit. Thank you. Councillor Hutchins, do you have more?
Well, just as far as I knew that the heritage goes up Reynolds, and it's the west side of Reynolds that is the heritage, not the east side.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I have the boundary
We
right
might have
here.
to
I
pass
can-
the map over to the counselor.
Is that one? No, thank you.
Better yet, we'll pass it over to the
Great.
overhead, and we can share it with everybody.
That's okay.
It'll happen. It'll happen. We may have to zoom out, but they can do that too.
So as I suspected, it's on the west side of Reynolds, not the east side of Reynolds, so the hospital is actually missing.
So it misses the hospital.
Yes.
All right. So sky's the limit.
Exactly.
Except I won't vote for more than the 4 stories that we've got there, so.
Be pointing out that there's a possibility.
All right. Well, let's see where you're going to go with your possibility. Mr. Planning Director.
Your Worship, just for point of clarification, the hospital is out, but because it's across the street from the district, it still requires a permit. So there still be that review. So as an example, the community center has to be reviewed through the Heritage Oakville Committee because it impacts from a visual standpoint. It's within a certain distance. I don't remember the exact distance.
So it's good news to know that there's some protection.
Yes.
Councillor?
I'm fine. I'm just merely pointing out that the heritage stops at Reynolds. West side is in the heritage, east side is not.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Worship, through you. I have a question about the tree canopy, and a lot of the times people talk about green space and losing trees, and actually by the end of it, when the process is done, there can be more trees in place with development than just a green playfield. So do we have a counting of how many trees are on the space now, and what our site plan is looking to have the tree canopy at after development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we do have an assessment that identified that there were 30 trees on the property as a whole, and this was the assessment that was completed in 2013. 8 of those 30 trees were provided an additional inspection based on a ground exercise. They did an aerial view of these trees to better determine their health and quality. Through the site plan exercise, we typically do have a tree canopy requirement to provide a certain percentage of tree canopy. Through that site plan exercise with this property, it will determine whether or not we are considering a requirement for additional trees on each lot on the case-by-case basis.
So is it possible then to at least guarantee tonight that no matter what happens, it will be an increased tree canopy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure that I can make that guarantee at this time, other than that we would practice our normal protocols in terms of how we provide for tree canopy in the site plan process.
Well, if I remember correctly from site plan, we have an objective for every district, including this one. Madam Commissioner?
Perhaps through you, Mr. Mayor, the best way to describe it is we would never drop below a minimum. So if the tree canopy, for example, and this is example, is a 30% rate now on the site, we'd look to achieve that through the site plan process. Normally, it's about 20% we look for residential, and so those are the provisions that we'd look to apply. So you wouldn't see a decrease.
Sorry, I can help. There wouldn't be a decrease, is what the commissioner just said. I guess, and I know the mayor is angst against making policy on the fly, but the great thing about doing this is we get to maybe set numbers and set quantities now, and I would not want to see, I would want to see much more than just keeping the status quo if we were going to go through with this. So I don't know what the technical ability is for us to do that here and now, but perhaps that would be something that I would consider supporting if we're looking at going ahead with the recommendations before us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. The Commissioner said that we maintain or improve as a policy, so you may already have your belt and suspenders on the point. Councillor Adams, I believe you were next.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm with our staff, when we bought the property, one of the objectives that we had was to protect the nature of the neighborhood around it and make sure that the character was maintained. And so we've tried to do like with respect to the lot patterns. I understand the school building itself is special and has a special thing. When council dealt with property, the Halton District School Board property on what's now Spring Blossom, we tried to do like-to-like and like-to-like with respect to townhouses and single detached. In that case, we didn't protect any green space. There was no parkette maintained, but we did, I think, maintain the character of the neighborhood. And when we're now dealing with the Coronation Drive site, we've kind of tried to do the same thing. Again, there's been no parkette maintained. But in this case, are you satisfied that we've maintained the character of the neighborhood?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I believe that we've achieved council's objectives with the plan that they've endorsed in terms of what was expected to happen with the Brantwood school site. I believe that there is a balance of what that character speaks to, and I think that the approach that we've taken with the zoning provisions that we're presenting before you this evening does just that. It is a bit unprecedented. We don't have regulations in our bylaw for residential units that speak to the preservation of a certain amount of landscaping or garage door widths in this area. So I think we are achieving those objectives and are maintaining the character of this neighborhood through this proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you. Through Mayor Burton, just a question to Ms. Closey regarding tree canopy. I'm just wondering, how many generations does it take to get back to the tree canopy if everything is cut?
I'm afraid, through you, Mr. Mayor, I couldn't answer that question. I know that Chris Mark is here, if you'd like to wait for him to come and answer that question. I would point out on this particular site, though, if Chris is coming down. There he is.
He's right here.
Yes. Chris could answer that question directly. The Brantwood school site, though, was a former playground area. So the bulk of the trees are predominantly on the municipal road allowance. So the opportunity to lose trees on this site is quite limited, as most of them sit on the municipal road allowance. So there's an opportunity to protect all what's there quite easily in the redevelopment of this particular site.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because I realize what we're trying to do, and I like what we're trying to do. The trouble is that we're learning it takes a long time to plant a twig to get an actual canopy cover. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad those trees are where they are. Thanks.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. With respect to the residential character, and I know we're in the process of the residential character study, would this study, when it comes through in its final edition, would we assume that would have impact with respect to the urban design of whatever is going to be built there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, at the present time, the residential character study is still in its final stages, yet to be presented to the subcommittee on the draft. And I can leave it to maybe Mark or Jane to elaborate more on the status of that study. Through what we have in place today, we have very robust urban design policies that will be utilized in the assessment of the development. And as Jane has indicated, through the various agreements that will be provided in the sale of and the development of the property, we can assure that our expectations are being met with what we anticipate to be constructed here.
Thank you.
Mr. Planning Director.
Through your worship to the councillor, just on with respect to the residential study, that work has been completed, but the work you're seeing here is very similar to the work we've done on that other project. So the residential character study to date was an information gathering exercise where no policies were formulated. That comes next in terms of the process. We've gone out and walked the streets. We understand the public realm, the private realm, that type of thing. What's happened here through Kate's work is we've done all of that on this site. So we've done it. We've reflected the residential character study in both phases in the outputs you see here tonight.
I think that clears up council questions. Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegations?
Our first registered delegation is Peter DeRosa on behalf of Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association.
Mr. DeRosa, long time no see. Welcome back. Council looks
make
forward
the
to your
point
information.
that I delegated for this item the last time I was up here. So it's the same thing. I did it for both.
We'll do our best to keep in mind what we heard the first time then.
Very good.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Charlie Finnerty.
Mr. Finnerty, Council's looking forward. Here comes Mr. Finnerty now. Welcome, Mr. Finnerty. Council's looking forward to your information.
In Mr. Council, is it all right if I do mine with another delegate in the interest of time?
It's fine, and the only thing I would ask is if you can move the mic towards yourselves, and if you want people to hear you, you need to talk at it.
All right, will do. My name is Charlie Finnerty, and I was a former student in Brentwood. I'm 15 years old, and I still use Brentwood today. I used it when I was younger, and I use it still now. I know many other young kids, like my 3 very young neighbors that go to Brentwood. And I know, when it's on a map, it may not seem like a very large space, except it's pretty rare to go by there and see it empty. And I just want everybody to realize that it's still being used very heavily. And I think it would be an injustice to get rid of or shrink such a well-used place. And
yeah, so to add on to what Charlie said, I'm also a resident of Douglas Avenue, and I'm here tonight to ask you to reconsider the amount of green space that will be kept and maintained at Brentwood Park. I want this to happen as I think Brentwood green space is very important, as once green space is taken away, it can't be put back easily. So, and also as a kid, as Charlie, I very much enjoyed playing a variety of games, sports here, including basketball and soccer, whose facilities, like the soccer nets and the basketball courts, will be taken down, I believe, with the current places that will be taken away. This is a great loss to future generations, as they don't get to experience what I have and what Charlie has, and also be creative with the green space that's provided with them. So I believe that in investment for future generations, that we should keep this green space so it can be there and always be there.
Could you just tell us your name, please?
Peter Bremerman. Sorry.
Thank you, Peter. Are there questions for the delegation? Councillor Giddings?
It's not directly a question, Mr. Mayor, but Charlie and Peter, thanks so much for coming out. I think I'd speak on behalf of all of council. We love it when youth are involved and come out, and I know it can be kind of scary standing there, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, oh wait, you're not done. There's more. Councillor Hutchins?
Yes, thank you very, very much for coming out. I do appreciate it. If council had to sell some of the space, how much would you think we should keep if we could?
Well, seeing the plans, it seems to just have enough for the play structure, and I think any amount of lots you can spare would be amazing, because the field now is being used for a variety of games like soccer, football, and right now it looks like it won't even be far enough to throw a football. So I don't know, as many as possible.
Yeah, I guess it would be good to have a substitute if we take away any, to have something for these kids, maybe a smaller soccer net if possible, or enough room for that. Because as Charlie said, there's not that much room for a basketball net or soccer nets currently. Maybe just play structure, and maybe not even a play structure, yes, with the current dimensions of it.
Okay, so you're looking for somewhere where you can just throw a ball around, not necessarily do soccer or anything, but somewhere so that the kids can be on the swings as well as others can be using and throwing a ball around.
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. And again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lischina?
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming out. I agree with Councillor Giddings. It is a tough thing to do. Have you, either of you or both of you, used Wallace Park for any of your play activities?
I've used Wallace Park before, yes.
Yeah, for tennis, I guess, courts there.
Okay.
A couple times.
So if it's actually being, the space is being reviewed in 2018, would you be interested in contributing your information, as you said, about basketball and other things like that, to play in the park?
Sir, could you repeat that?
Thank you.
So there's a huge green space. Can you hear me? A huge green space across the street at Wallace Park. It's going to be looked at in the next few months about how to better use that space. Would you be using that space if there were basketball courts there or other activities that you normally use at this current site?
I think it would be definitely used more.
Yes, as right now there's only a baseball diamond and like tennis courts, and only one I think is available to the public to play on.
So it does need to be redone for your generation?
Possibly, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, Your Worship, thanks. I had to get in on this, seeing as the youngest one on council here. I got to say thanks as well. I appreciate, and also, might I add, the only one with red hair sitting here, so thanks for coming up. Where do you guys go for a community center now? If you want to go swimming, you want to go and play basketball indoors or something like that, where do you have to go?
Usually I go to the Y. I don't know about Peter.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no community centers that I really go to it because.
So you have to travel pretty far. Then, are you excited about being able to use the new community center just the next street over?
Yes, I think so because there's supposed to be a pool and stuff, so that'd be nice.
That'd be great, yeah.
Yeah.
So as all of us have to do, and I have young children, sometimes they want to have, dessert and something else, or two candies, and sometimes I have to tell them you can't have both, so choose one. I guess, and not to say that it has to be so cutthroat, but it's not just Brentwood and keeping it as a green space. There's other things in play here. So I guess if you had to balance things, are you sitting there going, well, maybe we lose some things out of the community center, but we get to keep the green space, or where would you lean on your preference here?
I'm not really sure at this time.
It seems like the community center will be mostly an indoor thing, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's really important to keep some things outdoors. I don't know about the, lot for lot or all that, except, getting rid of a field, like putting in a building, can always be turned into another building, can always be turned into, residence or whatever, except, once you get rid of that grass, it's really hard to get it
No,
back.
I get it. Thank you very much, guys. I think you're going to be well served, but thanks for coming and speaking.
Thanks.
It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, very good answer. Councillor Dudek has a question for you.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say, well done. That can be very tricky, and you should be commended.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your time and your information. Madam Clerk.
The next delegation is Jimmy Yang.
Welcome, Mr. Yang. Council is looking forward to your information.
Thank you. Am I allowed to use the place document function, if possible?
We are happy to let you use any of our technology, new and old.
Thank you. I'm only 2 years older than Charlie, but I'm glad to be invited tonight. So, dear Mayor, members of Council, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I apologize for reading a little bit, but I do appreciate you guys providing a forum where we can share our perspectives. Again, my name's Jimmy Yang. I've lived in Oakville since 2007, and I live on Douglas Avenue looking across Brentwood Park. My wife Samantha Yang is here tonight as well. We've got 2 kids. Henry's 9 and Avery is 6, and they attend E.J. James and New Central, respectively. Certainly I can see how one might perceive my living across Brentwood Park as a reason as to why this might be more important to my family than others, but I can tell you that the park is much more important than that, and it's simply not the case. In fact, what living across the park provides us is a direct window view into what green spaces can do for a community, not only our community, not only our ward, but all residents who are lucky enough to live in the city of Oakville. Sam and I have had a chance to have this living room view and witness each day how Brentwood Park is the heartbeat of this community. People of all ages descend on this park, as Charlie mentioned. The fields, we often, us old folks, challenge people like Charlie to basketball games and lose badly. And these playground structures are used from morning to evening all year round. We all know Oakville is a beautiful place to live. I feel fortunate to have the opportunity to live here and raise our kids here, and we are well aware as residents under the leadership of the mayor and members of this council and previous to this council, a lot of great things happen. We live in a wonderful city with small town feel, wonderful events for all ages, all year round, and general livability that makes us all very appreciative. Additionally, we recognize Council's continued commitment to preservation of green space, heritage sites, and the environment. Some examples that we've discussed as residents: the water sustainability plan, where the town is minimizing discharge of pollutants into area waterways in Lake Ontario, the urban forest management program, and of course the preservation of our heritage trees that offer us more green canopy. But the reason I'm here today is every community, every ward in Oakville has these special small community parks and gathering places that really define this community. These places are the places that truly tie us together, where we meet for our coffees, all of us, where our kids meet for play dates, where a Sunday afternoon flag football game can happen or break out at any time, and where we make friends and deepen the special friendships that we have. It's for us where time really stands still and allows us to exhale and simply just be. Brentwood has served as a meeting place, a congregation place for families and neighbors, for people of all backgrounds and interests since the early 1920s. However, it's no more special than Seabrook Park in Ward 1, Coronation or Hopedale Park, Langtree Park, Margot Street Park, or Holden Heights Park, where I take Henry to play soccer. But it still is special. And if it is to be sold for development, then this special place will simply be no longer. As Charlie mentioned, once it's taken away, it cannot be returned. The reason I requested delegation this evening is because my family, our neighbors, our community, and our friends live, experience, and see every single day what the positive power of green space and outdoor active living can mean to a community. In my day job, I work with the Ministries of Health and local health integration networks, and we do a lot of system planning for communities across Ontario and Canada. And one of the principal factors that helps improve prevalence of chronic disease, mental health, is access to outdoor activity space. I'd like to take just a few minutes to provide members of council with a more tangible view on the heartfelt level of engagement and commitment and emotion of our community with a few examples. A few months ago, we had a discussion with a few neighbors just at the park that the city's plan was to develop the site of Brentwood in future, and that also 7 lots were to be used for residential development. The feeling led to my wife and I reaching out to just a few of our friends on social media to say, let's meet one afternoon, educate ourselves a little bit, and discuss how we feel about it. What was expected to be just a handful of people one afternoon was a crowded park with well over 100 residents, spanning all ages, young and old, new young families who've just moved in, showing solidarity and support of preserving as much green space as is possible. From that event came pages upon pages of signed petitions and documents with those signing saying, how can I help? How can my neighbors get involved? What can we do? At this same event, a few lawn signs were initiated. We took it upon ourselves just to make 10, hand them out to some of our friends. Over a period of 4 weeks, I thought it was Halloween because our door was knocking for 4 straight weeks saying, can we have more signs? And since then, over 150 signs have been printed off and put on lawns. And we were able to have wonderful, lengthy discussions with residents from all over the neighborhood, of all ages, saying, how do we voice our support? Since then, I've had an opportunity to work with Eric Brummerman, who will speak after me. I've had a chance to have meetings with multiple resident and association members who have been wonderful and educational in their knowledge of all the factors that affect all Oakville residents. I've had deep conversations with our residents to get educated, and I've had really healthy two-way discussions with our city councillors and with the mayor and the chief of staff of the city of Oakville. The perspective that I hope to share with each of our members tonight is that Brentwood Park is representative of all the special little parks and play spaces throughout Oakville in all of our wards. They represent that little glue of community within each of our wards. The other perspective I hope to shed light on tonight is that this is not the shared heartbreak of 5 residents who've come together, not 20, not 30, not 50. We have 100, 150 passionate Oakville residents who have signed on to mailing lists, ordered lawn signs, or are here tonight to support preservation of green space. I do hope that members of council will take into consideration some of the perspectives that I've shared on behalf of a lot of my neighbors and the community in our neighborhood. Our residents understand the good work and the challenging work that members of council and the mayor do each and every day for our city. We ask you to think about all of the gathering places across our wards today and in the future, and to consider preserving Brentwood green space. Brentwood has served our generations of families and seniors since the 20s on a much quieter street that affords our children a safe environment to travel to and from, to meet and make connections that will last a lifetime. We hope that our green space will share that lifetime as well. With that, I thank you for your time and reflection.
Thank you for your information, Mr. Yang. Are there questions for Mr. Yang? Councillor Hutchins.
Hello, Mr. Yang. Thank you very much for coming. If there's a compromise here, obviously, if we are going to get, if you're going to get anything, what would that compromise, in your opinion, what it should it be? How much extra?
In my personal opinion?
Yeah.
Again, we've engaged with so many people who are here tonight. This has been hundreds of conversations layered upon one another. I don't speak on their behalf, but I do think that, from what we see every day outside our window, it's a very busy park. A number of seniors, families, and young children use it quite often. And, for me personally, I think that it has to be functional green space, and it has to respect the heritage of how people have come together as a community. So for me, having the playground intact, having free space and areas to gather that keep the integrity of what this community park represents is what we would hope for. I don't speak on behalf of everyone, though.
Okay, so what about Wallace Park then? I mean, it's across the road, very close, so why Brantwood? Why Wallace? Why not Wallace?
Well, if, with all respect in terms of looking at some of the reports and the plans, there's measurements, there's PDF documents, there's surveys, and then there's living in the community. And I would say that if you walk to Wallace Park and you look for kids who are playing there, families, seniors connecting, people meeting for morning coffees, you won't find too many people there, but you will find baseball players there, teams on Sunday afternoons. Brantwood it's been around since the 1920s. I've only been there for 2 years, so I can't speak on behalf of the people who've used it for many years. But it's on a quieter street. The gating is smartly done, and people have gone there for generations upon generations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Chisholm.
This might be a question for staff, just for clarity. I'm hearing that Brantwood is a green space or a park. Just for clarification, we assume this was a Brantwood public school playground. It was never designated as a park. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, you're correct. This was the playground associated with the school itself. So it wasn't identified as a park or a town park. We do though, have reciprocal agreements with the school boards so that there is a shared use of those, but it's not a typical town park.
All right. Mr. Yang, I only have one question for you. With regard to the 3 lots that council's plan is preserving for the playground, is it your intention to leave council to believe that you and your neighbors will not gather there for your coffee and your camaraderie and your conversation?
I couldn't speak on behalf of them, to be honest.
Will you not be going there?
I would have to really understand what it looks like, how it's designed, to get a feel for it. And then you have to kind of live in the community for a while and see whether the integrity of what's been there since 1923 remains.
Have you had a chance to look at the report to see the design?
Back to front.
So you have a layout for it there in the report, but I understand your reluctance on the question that I'm asking, and I'll leave off. Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Eric Bremerman.
Welcome, Mr. Bremerman. I look forward to finding out what you have to offer as a result of all the to and fro we've had on this.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, esteemed council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. And like the other councillors, I'm very encouraged that if nothing else comes of you know, the things we adults do, it's great to have young members of the community come out and speak to the issue. So there's one positive already tonight. Interestingly, one of them is my son's, and I did nothing to tell him to come here tonight, and he came on his own with his buddy Charlie. So that's great for all of us. Since I last delegated to you on this matter on October 5th, as the mayor suggested, there's been, and as others have already mentioned, there's been lots of dialogue in the community, which again I view as very positive. And I don't want to go over the ground that Jimmy just covered, and Jimmy mentioned he's new to Douglas Avenue. I've been there since with my family since 1999, and he's been there for 2 years. But over this issue, we've also had the opportunity to start to work together and get to know each other, which again is another positive. So I'm going to focus on, I think, the positive aspects of this, the opportunity, and some optimism, because I feel that over the evening, you know, there's a lot of I sense a little bit of negativity and a little feeling of, you know, an all or nothing proposition, and nothing could be further from the truth. I think and I was formerly, as I mentioned last time I was here, I was formerly in the TCRA. I'm not now. I had a chance to get together with the community folks that Jimmy spoke to, that have come together on an ad hoc basis. I've talked to the residents associations members here before me this evening, and I apologize I couldn't speak to everybody. But to me, there's a lot of alignment here, and I think, and I don't want to cover ground that's been covered, but you know, the community is thankful for the good work that the town and council has done to preserve land and to control its development. So, you know, full marks on that. I think behind the community center, there's lots of support. I think the delegation of the TCRA, you know, went as far to say that they recognize that funds need to be available from the sale of lots to help finance the community center. So there's alignment on that, and I suggest there's alignment with everybody in the room on that. I think where there's opportunity to do just a little bit better, and just like I would tell my son to reach a little bit higher at all times in his life, you know, we've heard extra green space, and I don't think anybody in this room, and certainly this council and this mayor, you know, we're a green town, and we aim to be a livable community. And by all means, I think the good work that's being done on Glen Abbey and other places is to be commended. So we're all really supportive of that. When you turn the corner to the Brantwood Park, and I thought it's, again, interesting to me, and while appearing on my personal behalf here, the lawyer and me, you know, explaining to kids the difference between a reciprocal agreement to use public school lands versus a park. I get it. I'm not sure that the kids using it get that distinction. So they could use it as a park under a reciprocal agreement with the town, but going forward, if the motion as it sits today passes, that will no longer be a possibility in the size, and there's been lots of, you know, viewpoints in terms of what the parquet can do and can't do. But at the end of the day, what the reciprocal agreement provided for them, at least until 2010, and until the school is formally closed, it won't continue to do in the future. So, I think we adults can talk about reciprocal agreements, and I don't think the kids or even seniors will understand what that means to them. So let me turn, and I'm not being, pardon? No, I'm not being, I apologize if I misspoke. I think what I'm saying is that.
Mr. Brimmerman, so we strive for order in our meetings, and we try to have only one person speaking at a time. And I will tell you that if your purpose is to persuade council of a point of view, behaving in a way that isn't consistent with council's idea of polytests and one at a time is not a good way to persuade anybody. I just leave it at that. So try to accommodate each other, and I poll the audience after. If you have something you're burning to say, you're best to wait and say it in turn rather than to interrupt somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, in my comment to the planning department was not at all to suggest that there aren't sound planning principles being used. I just think that as adults we often engage in a nuanced discussion that I think sometimes misses the piece. And what I want to bring is a holistic message to the two chambers tonight. And I think I want to pick up on something that Jimmy said and others have said before him about functional park space. And to me, of course, the town of Oakville and the planning department that works hard to achieve the various different objectives that the town and its population has, of course they adhere to current and sound planning principles, and they work hard to do all the things they need to do to inform council and the population. But I would also argue that, and I suspect it's part of good planning principles as well, that when one is looking at how can we replan space, I would argue looking at space that's been successfully, has been successful space since the 1920s, and I fortunately I'm not old enough to know what happened back then, but I would argue that since 2010, when the school was closed, I think the worry sometimes is when schools get closed and the pertinent parks are there's the worry also for council to say, well, will this space continue to be used? And I think the proof is in the pudding, and you can look at what's happened since 2010, since Brantwood closed. I would argue that since 2010, the community has probably more than ever realized how important that space is to them. So I would ask for that consideration in terms of the evidence, apart from planning principles that exist today, the evidence that suggests that this park is an important part of the community for young and old alike. So to me, getting back to the opportunity and the positive piece here is, the community is not arguing, as I see it at least, with the redevelopment of the Brantwood School, which has been designated in heritage, and we'll see 9 or so units or dwellings there. I think if you took if you asked people in the community, and councillors I think have attempted to do that of some of the delegates tonight, what needs to be done to create a park space at Brantwood that's going to satisfy the community's needs. I think you would find that it's not an all or nothing proposition. I think that people are prepared to and are fully committed to doing in Ward 3 and in Southeast Oakville our part to help fund the community center and also help fund other aspects of the town. So it's not that we're pitting it's not an all or nothing discussion. 9 units at the Brantwood site, also being respectful of the heritage designation, and then probably some more lots. There's not an insignificant amount of money that is going to be raised by that. So with that backdrop, and again, what was said earlier, and I said it when I was here in October, when the green space is developed, it will be gone, and it's irretrievably gone in essence. And to me, if the council on what comes before it tonight, and I assume as other delegates after me and all that's heard, cannot see itself to finding a solution that I think creates some more green space at that site to accommodate some of the needs that the community, I think, has expressed to you. To me, I think it would be a mistake in my mind to simply rezone it and take the chance that you got it right. I think there's lots of examples. Again, if this was an all or nothing proposition, this might be easier for all of you. You're going to say, I've got budget needs in other wards, and this is just not a position that can be sustained when I look at the needs in other wards. But I think in this case, we're asking for a limited amount of additional space at some cost, I understand. But again, if you can't see yourself to granting that today, I would argue that it would be prudent at least to leave it for some element of reconsideration and to create a healthy buffer of lots between the planned parquet and the remaining site, so at least there can be further thought given to it. And to me, we haven't seen the full story yet in terms of all the other sites. You know, should there be a walkthrough from Brantwood Park to Wallace Park? All those things deserve some consideration. But if you approve the plan as it's before you this evening, those chances are or may be removed. So I would, with all that, just ask for your reconsideration of the issues, and I trust other delegates will have other good points to make. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. Councillor Hutchins has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Berman, for coming out. I want to, you asked about compromise, and it's not an all or nothing. What, in your estimation, would the parquet need so that people could be on the swings as well as others, older boys, girls, be doing other things, throwing balls elsewhere?
Okay, and I'll try and respond to that question as directly as I can. As Mr. Yang, Jimmy Yang already said, you know, I think, you know, we've spoken to the community, tried to understand where the community stands on this, and so I'm not an elected official that speaks for anybody, but in terms of sort of reading the temperature of neighbors and friends and people we've gotten to know through this process, I think there's certainly a willingness to compromise. If you ask me a personal opinion, and I've walked that site, I've paced it off, done it with some people around the council chamber. To me, something that gets us past where the existing play structure ends would be a compromise that I think the community may be able to live with. I think it doesn't get necessarily, you know, Peter and Charlie their soccer field in the way it exists today, but you know, I think there is the hope that you know, space at Wallace and others may perform that function down the road, but it's a little bit early to see that. So I think the reason you're getting also responses that perhaps aren't fully direct on point is that we don't know exactly yet what we're trading for. But is that an answer that addresses your question?
Yes, it is, and maybe I could ask staff what that distance roughly is to the end of where the current playground is. How much space? How much would that be? 1 or 2 lots?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is, I think we have the aerial photo, which we could tell better, but
Should we put? I've got one here as well, but maybe they've got a better one.
it actually shows the lotting fabric with the aerial underneath it. I think you could see from that.
Can switch me over.
Can we put it up, or don't you do?
Oh, it's wait, it's down here.
All right, let's decide who's putting it up.
I got it.
Kate is going to put it up,
I got it.
so everybody just relax for a second.
Oh, this one here. Okay. Be patient.
You're about 3 lots in. I don't have the aerial here.
Okay, it was maybe in Gabe's. I think my scaling it off, it's 2 lots Perhaps 3, but more likely 2 seems to cover the area of the actual playground space now.
Councillor, does that answer your question satisfactorily? Madam Clerk, would you put that up, please?
I think we've, if we could just, I think, get the camera going here. Is that a better one? Probably, huh? No, that doesn't have the lots on, but yeah, okay.
Actually, the page from the report that Mr. Bremerman just had up is exactly what the Commissioner was referring to. You can see through the lotting structure, you can see the ghosted outline of everything.
That's the, yeah, I think the existing play structure goes up to about the end of my pen there.
So it'd be about 1.5 lots?
It looks like 2 to me.
2? Oh, okay.
I don't know how you sell a half a lot anyway, so
No, I
I think we're moving in increments of 1 here.
Yeah. And if I may say, I think also why perhaps there aren't direct responses. None of us are surveyors or planners, so I think, you know, that the good work of others would be needed to delineate that clearly. Really not my skills in putting these things up would help.
Well, thank you for the answer and the opportunity to look at the overhead. Any other questions, Council? Councillor Elgar.
Okay, you spoke for 10 minutes. I'm trying to figure out what your ask really is. Honestly, like you say you want some more green space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I don't want you to speak on behalf of other people, yourself. What is it you are asking for?
I think my response to Councillor Hutchins is, if you're speaking to me as a private resident and a citizen on Douglas, you know, with everything that I've heard dating back to, you know, the 2013 studies, the various discussions we've had, I think to me, you get to exactly what I said a moment ago, which is a buffer zone past the existing playground, which I think
One lot? Like
no, I think that's 2-ish. That's probably 2.5. That's between 2 and 3 lots. So,
Mr. Bremerman, we're not dealing in fractions. You're going to have to. So, Council can't give an answer except in units here. The councillors, 2 of them now, have asked you to pick your personal number. I'll just give you one more chance to be clear. Okay. And if you don't wish to, we'll leave it at 2-ish.
Well, let me tell you a little family story. My father was an engineer, and I think to his chagrin, I became a lawyer. So you've exposed my lack of math skills, but I would go with 3.
Thank you. The man wants 3. Thank you, Council, for helping to assist Mr. Bremerman to be clearer. Mr. Bremerman, thank you very much for being here and your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you for your consideration.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Our last listed delegation to this item is Chris Stout.
Former Councillor Stout, welcome back to these hallowed chambers. Council looks forward to your wisdom.
Thank you.
And information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of Council. First thing I want to do is to say how
just try to say it near the microphone.
Far this council has come from when I was on it. It's great that you are in the position that you're in here. As difficult as these little decisions are, and hard decisions have to be made, and we trust you to make them. You're not on the back foot here. You're not where we used to be all the time. Right? You own the property. You did masterful things that took foresight, and those of us who understand how difficult that is and how the Planning Act conspires against our ability to control the form of our community, or had done until current mayor and council improved the official plan and the way these things are handled, are grateful for the fact that you've put yourselves in this position, you've put our community in this position. And I'm saying that because I know that many of the residents here don't realize how big a deal it was that we ended up owning the hospital land through the master stroke of negotiation of the mayor, that we ended up buying Brentwood, that we put ourselves in this position where we actually can have, and you have chosen to the best of your ability to find ways for this town to decide what's there, rather than to put yourself at the mercy of planning applications from new property owners, and then the risk of Ontario Municipal Board hearings, which are expensive and very often don't turn out in ways that we would have chosen. So I think you're really to be commended for putting us in the position that we're in today on this issue. Having said that, and I do think those of us who understand that are very grateful for that, and no one here who would like to see, as I would, some preservation of a greater amount of space here, doesn't understand how much has happened that's positive for our community as a result of these council decisions. But I want to put it in perspective on history. This part of town is evolving from being a town. It used to be a town. It had its own hospital. It had its own high school. It had everything to make it a town. And it is now moving in its very last phase, I would say, towards becoming a suburban neighborhood. That is a massive transition. It has happened relatively gradually, but it's still wrenching for a lot of the people that live in it. It is still a major change in how things happen. There are no longer walk-to schools for people that had walk-to schools from the 20s. They've lost what they moved into. And I listened to some of the comments, and of course I've read the staff report. There's excellent work in all of that, but there's a comment that the demographics are that it's getting older. Well, that's because people stay. It's the turnover of houses in this type of neighborhood is dramatically different than it would be in most communities in Southern Ontario. It is much slower. People live in their homes their whole lives. And then they leave, and a bunch of kids come, and it happens again. So these people it is increasingly people in their 60s right now, but those people will be cashing out or moving out in a box, and there will be a refresh in the neighborhood as time goes by. I hope to be one of those taken out in a box, to be honest, because I love the neighborhood that much. I say, my perspective is from somebody whose daughter went to Brantwood and went to Lynbrook, both schools that don't exist anymore. And we lived in a community where we met on the tarmac, and we had a community. A very, very strong community. Councillor Noel came down once and helped in a fundraiser at Lynbrook School, and I think was quite taken by the spirit of community that exists. And that it still exists today, and somehow it's managed to organically happen around the place where the buses pick people up, which is Brantwood, right? So you've got this park. It works. It's not Wallace Park. Wallace Park, you've got to cross big streets to get to. You don't let your 5 or 6 year old run over and join the Frisbee game or the football game at Wallace Park by himself. You don't let that kind of stuff happen. But you do at Brantwood, and you do because it's little streets. Somebody watches them coming across, and everybody makes it work. And it's just something that has organically worked. And that was brought up before, it works. We don't know what's going to happen with all of these changes. We're losing one pool, getting another pool. We've lost the high school track. We've lost the high school football field. Lots of things have disappeared over the years. We're getting a community center, very foreign thing, but definitely something desirable, and congratulations for doing that. And we're getting infill development that is compatible because of your foresight. So if we don't get any more on this, I still say kudos. Great work, right? But there's a Colin Powell quote that I really like. He said, if there is a difference of opinion between the rear echelon and the commander in the field shall be taken to be right. So what I'm talking about is the local organic community knowledge cannot be replaced by planning as a profession. It just can't. There's nothing that can be done in studies, no matter how professionally they're done, that really will make it work the way you think it's going to work necessarily. People will still make their natural pathways and not necessarily the ones you thought they were going to make. And that's how life works. So my suggestion here, and I don't know how you mechanics for doing it, are hold on to as much of it as you can. I mean, this real estate's not going to go down in value. If it turns out that you've fixed it with Wallace Park and you don't need this anymore, and the community goes, you know what? we're okay with it, well, bonus, you'll do better. You'll have more cash. It won't be today, but it'll be more cash. So there's nothing to be lost, I think, in some kind of patience with it. You know, ideally, give it 3 lots, give it room so the kids can actually, you know, kick a soccer ball. What's great is it's unsupervised, you know, that what goes on there. You know, we're going to have a community center, everything's going to be organized, and there might be, you know, special hours for stuff that you're allowed to do without, you know, it being part of an organized sport, right? But it won't be just spontaneous. It won't just be happening all the time as it does at the school, which is, you know, a classic thing. You know, something that, I mean, some of the best communities in the world happened before there was such a thing as a planning profession. So I think trusting some of these feelings that you're getting from people might be worth doing. So I would either say, fine, we're gonna cut off 3 lots and make it 120 feet bigger, or I would say, let's delay it and see how some of the other planning comes out before we land on how many of these lots we're actually going to sell. That's my suggestion. Again, no matter where it ends up, I think you've done stellar work in protecting this community through these bold actions of buying the land and controlling the form.
Thank you very much for your information. Councillor Hutchins appears to have a question for you.
Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for coming out. You're the one who got me into politics. When was it? 15, 16 years ago, somewhere around that, when I joined the TCRA. So everything after that is your fault, right? You're saying keep a little extra, and then if Wallace works, we can come back
At
later
a
on
minimum.
and sell it?
I mean, I would just block off the 3 lots permanently. But if you are unwilling to do that, then buy yourselves some time. If you can't go that far, then buy yourselves some time. It's not going to cost you anything to do that. And let's see how the neighborhood evolves with all of these really quite radical changes that are occurring.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Stout. For clarity, there are 3 lots currently that were preserved in the original plan, so this is an additional,
yeah.
an incremental.
Yeah, you're
3.
looking at a half an acre right now is what you've got for that, which is tight, you know, for anything. That's like, you know, a lot of the lots in the area are, you know, a quarter of an acre, right? So.
All right, I appreciate that, and also appreciate your message and the way in which it's delivered. You have a delightful way of weaving tales.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Councillor Stout, former Councillor Stout.
Sorry, Your Worship, my apologies.
Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, I have a question of staff about something the delegate asked. Just kicking the can down the road, does that impact the timelines for opening the new community center? What is the impact of holding off on that element in terms of the overall plan that we've been working on for 4 years?
The money that you would forego on those 3 lots, you would have to dip into further reserves or raise taxes.
Thank you very much.
All right, Council, I promised that I would poll the audience in case others were inspired with additional information for Council, and I see one hand at least. Would you come down, introduce yourself, sir, and share your information with Council?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council members. I just wanted to stand up here for a brief couple minutes here, and I hear a lot of people have represented.
Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. My name is Kevin Dickinson, and I live on Trafalgar, very close to Freestone, and I have a 2.5-year-old son, moved into this Oakville area about 3 years ago with my wife, and we hope to continue and build our family. And I heard of older kids that like to play in the area, and I'd like to speak to the younger kids as well, my son and then other families that we've met. And my son affectionately refers to this park area as Darsh Park because one of his friends from daycare always goes there as well, so he sees his friend Darsh at this park, and he always wants to go to Darsh Park on his way home from daycare. So it's a really nice place for us to go. And I think what's nice too is that you've got a a park, a play structure that young kids can play at, as well as older kids can also go there. And you can be watching your kids of various ages in the same area. And just a bit of background. My wife and I were looking for housing in Toronto, and we looked around, and housing prices continue to go up. This is a very nice area. But it's also very accessible to downtown Toronto. So I think it's very possible that you're going to see more young families move into the area. There's more housing going up in the area. And you can get to downtown Toronto in half hour on the GO train. So this is an area that we chose over, say, Bloor West Village. And this is what young families are looking around and weighing the different options and seeing that this is something that you could see a trend in more young families coming in. So a trend was recognized as maybe there's fewer and fewer young families in this area based on recent census numbers. But I think you could see that reverse. You could see with this community center and with more housing going in and having a park, a play structure, as well as a field area as well for your older kids to play at while your younger kids are playing on the play structure and while you push them on the swings. I think that's a really great possibility. And I don't hear that that's something at some of the other parks that are currently in the area. So I think that's what differentiates this park from the other parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Councillor Hutchins may have a question for you.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for coming. I do appreciate it. I've been asking the same question to a lot of people. How much would you consider adding to the present parquet to make it more playable, if you like?
Yeah, it's just my own personal view. I think the 3 lots sounds very reasonable. That provides enough space for throwing a football or kicking a soccer ball, as well as having the play structure there.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And, Your Honour, I'd like to move the approval of the staff recommendations later on, if possible. And I have a motion to put.
I think you're a little premature.
Oh, am I? Okay, sorry.
We have at least one more to listen to. Come on down. Take turns. Arm wrestle. Flip a coin.
Hi, I'm Scott McNabb. We live.
We need. I don't know what I don't know what happened to the microphone, but we need
you don't
a
want me
microphone,
to zoom
or
in
no
on
one
this,
will
do
hear
you?
you. Chris, we have a microphone issue. Oh, maybe we don't. There you go. Just if you address the microphone, people can hear you.
Hi, my name's Scott McNabb. We live on Douglas, about a block and a half south of the proposed, or the park under discussion. I want to say I've lived in a number of communities throughout southwestern Ontario through my life and business and whatnot. I've had the opportunity of living in Oakville 3 times over that period. And one thing that I want to say is if there's one defining perspective that I have on Oakville is the friendliness of the community. I've lived in communities that are very, very isolated. Neighborhoods are isolated. But I've lived in Glen Abbey area, I've lived in the southeast Oakville area, and it is the community and the neighborhood which defines the quality of Oakville. And I'm now in a seniors category. If you use the Zoomer definition, I've been there for a long time. If you use normal definitions, I'm just getting there. But one perspective I'd like to give you about seniors that may be a bit different than what I've heard and some of the inferences are, is that certainly that I've seen in our community is that seniors are vibrant and active. And they also have a lot of grandchildren. Within our 4 neighbors around us, we have 13 grandkids. And I can tell you what, when our grandkids come and visit, there are 2 things we always do with our kids. One is go kerplunking, throwing stones, in Lake Ontario, down by Navy Park, or anywhere along that on that waterfront, and 2, going to this park. We have 2-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 9-year-olds. A 9-year-old has learned to graduate from a little play swing to how many bars that she can climb on the monkey bars. And my grandson, I've got a little mini football. He's 4 years old. He's catching it. I can't wait till I get a regulation CFL football in his hands, and then he can throw it as far as Charlie can. And ideally, it would be in this park. It's the proximity. And don't forget, the seniors bring a lot of activity to the area. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I believe the next hand I saw was George Niblock. Welcome, Mr. Niblock. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much. So I'm with the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, and a lot of what I'm here to say has now been mentioned, so I'll be quick. But the Lakeside Residents Association believes that as much green space should be kept as possible throughout Oakville. And so on this site, the play equipment fits. We know that. We've got the plan here. What's really lacking is any kind of free play space adjacent to it. And so we would very much endorse what has been said by others, that 3 additional lots would really make the difference between a good usable park and one that's pretty limited in its functionality. I'll note here that this park, the size of the park that's proposed is just 0.15 hectares. I don't think there are any parks in Oakville that are that small. The ones certainly that are listed here, Wallace, Georgia Square, Post Park, Maple Valley, all significantly larger. In addition to the Chisholm School and Limbrook sites that remained, the parkland that remained on those sites. So we think that 3 lots would really make this a viable park for families in the local area that actually really uses it on a daily basis. And a lot of these people have multiple children at different ages. As others have said, it's very difficult to say, okay, the little ones will stay here and we'll send the 6, 7, 8-year-olds around the corner to Wallace Park. It's just, it just doesn't work that way practically. And I also agree with Mr. Stote that, you know, you've held on to these properties for a good 5 years now, and in that time, the values have gone through the roof. I don't think there's any loss to the town in holding on to these properties for longer. But we would certainly encourage retention of 3 lots, 3 further lots.
Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you.
Councillor Hutchins, I gather you don't need to ask him how many. He picked up on your line of questioning. Thank you, George.
Anybody else? Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Come on down. Please introduce yourself to council and the community.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Declan Doyle. I live on Allen Street, and in terms of a short introduction, I have 3 kids who all go to New Central, 8, a 6, and a 4-year-old. And outside of all of the great material that's been covered, I wanted to add something that came from a perspective from a meeting I was at last week with Councillor Giddings to talk about the intended use on the hospital site. And after, because of my busy schedule, as you could imagine, I brought my daughter after dancing. And she had a very pressing question that I want to phrase to you in a different way this evening. When looking at some of the decisions that need to be made for the hospital use of lands, her question was what's happening with Brantwood and the change to put in a change in the playground. And I appreciate from some of the comments tonight that there are trade-offs to be met and you have difficult decisions to be made and you have financial consequences to all those decisions. You've also tried to accommodate the community by putting in part of a playground in there that I think will meet some of the needs of our younger generation. But what hasn't been met is that we haven't really talked about what happens to the basketball nets when they get torn down, or what happens to the soccer field when it gets moved. So while I appreciate that there is a discussion going on the hospital lands, and now I also understand next there will be a discussion on the Wallace lands, it's very hard as a resident to make some of those decisions, because as we're looking at losing part of our facilities and losing green space and seeing the changes to Brentwood, we don't yet know what the outcome is on the hospital lands. Will it all be passive space? Will it be active space? We don't know what the outcome will be on the Wallace lands, which I think are still for further discussions. So I believe there was a commenter earlier that spoke to the fact that, all of these decisions need to be thought of in an integrated way, because we are losing the soccer field and we're losing a place to play football and we're losing basketball nets. And are we losing those for 1 year? Are we losing those for 4 years until the hospital site is complete? It's really hard as a resident, and I imagine it's hard for you as well, to make those decisions and put those in context. So similar to one of the earlier deputants, I wonder if, not making a decision is also a decision. Is it possible for consideration to consider the use of that space, consider it with whatever changes might happen at Wallace, and then say, if you're not acting on the land, it likely won't lose any value or any opportunity, and then we reserve the right to make a decision later as we think about the uses for Wallace and the uses of the hospital land. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. Nick, any questions?
No, I'm fine.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Why not? You've heard what I asked other people. What's your opinion of how much extra lots should, maybe as a compromise, be added to the parquet?
And I appreciate that question's coming, and unfortunately I don't really have an answer for it, because my question is, where does a basketball court fit in and where does the soccer field fit in? And I don't know if that fits into 3. I don't know if there's accommodation somewhere else, but we just hope to have those same, the similar types of facilities available. And while I would prefer a Brentwood because they are there and it's convenient and it's a quiet street where my kids have almost all learned to ride their bikes, I'm just wondering, if not, and knowing that there will be basketball in the community center in 2021, what happens over the next 4 years? When my daughter is 8 now and she turns 12.
I'm going to be tough with you.
Sure.
All right. We don't know yet the details. We are discussing Brentwood right now. So if you had to choose, never mind thinking about maybe what's on Wallace, maybe what's on the hospital. We don't know, but we're looking at Brentwood. What would you choose?
But I don't want to quote any Rush lyrics, even though I would love if those made it into the record of this evening. But if we choose not to decide, we still have made a choice. And what I'm saying is, it's very hard to come to that determination not knowing what else is going. So if we defer this decision and agree to come together as a community and make that at another point, that's still a decision that is in front of council and could be made this evening.
After all this time, I don't think council is wanting to defer the decision. I think they want to move forward because it impacts the hospital, it impacts the lands at hospital, recreational center that's going to be built, and there's a whole cascade of things going down that has to be moved forward.
And I appreciate the financial decision for you and also the great comments from the earlier deputants.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchins. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Information with respect to the soccer field. I'm going to direct this to staff. The classification of that soccer field, what classification is it, and taking it out of the inventory, would that have any impact in any of the organized soccer in the municipality?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be considered a minor soccer field. And taking it out of the inventory, it's not currently permitted by any of the soccer clubs in town. So it's just open free space.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
My pleasure. Thank you.
A last time, any more last minute ideas? Yes, sir. Same idea. Please introduce yourself and share your information.
My name is Mike Morgan, and I live at the corner of Douglas and Sumner, and I've lived in the community for a long time. My kids both went to Brentwood, and the community's turning over. He's moved back to Oakville with his wife, and they bought a house in our community, and slowly but surely it will turn over. I have to congratulate the members of the town council with their patience and working with the community for 4 years to try to bring this thing to conclusion, and I think you've done a great job. We're probably pretty demanding, but we're a close community. I have one concern. If you need to develop the lots on the Brantwood site, any number of them, I appreciate that you've done a study on the character of the community, and I think that's wonderful that you've done that. Something you should think about, however, is that the community, when it was developed, was not developed the way communities are developed and subdivisions are developed today, where you hire a green wind and they come in and they build. And they build 150 houses. And when you drive through there, they may have different designs, but there's something similar about the whole community. And that's what's unique about our community. When you drive down the streets, none of the houses are the same, nor do they have the same kind of finishes or quality. They're all a little bit different, and it's kind of special. And I'm concerned if we hand the development of the Brantwood site over to one developer, and we say, here's 5 building sites for you to build houses on, we can set limits on them and design criteria. But I'm really concerned that it's going to look like a little piece of a suburb that one developer has hired architects for, and there's going to be the similarity of it plonked into our community. You appreciate what I'm saying? It'll have a sameness about it that is in conflict with the nature of the community itself. So the way it was developed originally was the lots were sold off. And then the individuals who bought the lots, they decided what they were going to build on and hired individual people to design and build those houses. And so they have that character. They're different. And as it's evolved, the houses, some of them have been torn down, but in every case, now, pretty much, the homeowner is the one that's in charge. They own the lot. And so if you could come up with a different process than hiring a major developer to develop those lots and could put it back into the hands of the community to decide what they would like to do, I think it might work better for the community. I can't guarantee it, but we might be more in keeping with the way we developed, or that the community was developed and has evolved up to this date. And that's all I have to say, and again, thank you for your work.
Thank you very much for the concern. I can give you a little bit of good news.
What's the good news?
Nothing in the decision before council tonight determines how the lots will be sold as a package or individually.
Excellent.
And that will come back to council, and I actually think everybody on council is in sympathy with the idea. I haven't had a chance to ask them, but I'm reasonably confident. I've gotten to know them a bit. So thank you very much for bringing that. Okay, since we have hardly anything else tonight, I'm going to confine this to table now. And I'm going to pass the chair to the acting mayor, who I believe is Councillor O'Meara. And I'm going to ask him to recognize me so that I can move a motion, and in due course, I'd like to be the last speaker to my motion.
With pleasure, Your Worship, if you would like to put forward your motion right now.
Thank you. To be brief, I'm moving the staff recommendation that is in front of council.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder on that? No. Nope.
The good news is no seconders are required.
That's why you do full-time and I'm only part-time. I will open it to the floor for any comments or anyone to speak to the motion. Councillor Adams.
I'm going to support the recommendation of our mayor and of our staff on this matter. I know this is a very difficult issue for the community. We went into this process with the intent of controlling what happened to try to make sure that we didn't have a situation where a developer took the site and brought forward some crazy application that just would not fit in the community. And I think what we've got here does that. It ensures protection of the stable neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood. I recognize the desire for more green space, and like everybody else, I think we'd like to maximize the green space that's available. In the broader community, the OTMH, the hospital site, will now have green space on it like never before. That site was never available to the community, and I recognize the community can't yet use it. It's not there for them to use, and therefore I would think it's very hard to imagine how that site will look when it's all done and complete in a couple of years' time. And I will continue to support the efforts of our staff and the community to design that site in a way that will work for the community and make it a fully usable site. Around town, we've got many other school sites that unfortunately are being declared surplus by our school boards. In our ward, we already dealt with one that was on Northridge, and no land was maintained for the community as parkland on that one. There's another one going through right now that's Coronation, where right now there's no parkette being designed into it. We've got other ones. In Ward 5, we've got St. John, we've got Holy Family that are both at risk of being declared surplus. I think St. John before Holy Family. St. Anne was one that we just dealt with, and in that case we followed our staff recommendation to allow a small parkette to be included in that, but we didn't buy it. We didn't control it directly. Same thing with Coronation. I understand there may be, and Councillor O'Meara and Robinson, you might correct me, but I understand that there's a Lakeshore Woods site that is at risk now as well. Not sure how we'll deal with that one. St. James in the South Central area is another one. There's 2 other schools in the Halton District School Board where the utilization rates are low. And someday, they haven't been declared yet, but someday there may be another one. When you add up all those sites, there's something like $115 million in property that the community would have to buy in order to control and build those into green sites. And I don't think that's a viable thing. And I think there are better green sites for us to go out and buy and purchase. And we are working on some of those things as the mayor has announced a few over the last couple of weeks. And so with all of that, I'm going to follow our staff recommendation. I think that the parkette here is a needed one. And I think when you add it to the other parkland that's in the other parts of the community, I'm hopeful that we're going to have a full community of open space and parkland to use.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I have Councillor Chisholm next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very difficult decision for me because I used to go to Brantwood. I went to do Central and I went to OTHS. And over the years, there has been great changes in the town of Oakville. And to echo everybody's thoughts, and who've been here for many years, understand that, it is happening. And on the unfortunate part, or fortunate part, depends which side of the fence you're on, potential growth is here, and through the province intensification and so forth. But what I do really support is that the town has control of this site. We're not selling it off where we had some challenges, and I'm going a little bit of my history with respect to Queen Elizabeth Park's High School, whereby we purchased that too, and the development to me was poorly done at that time. We do have parks in Ward 2 that are smaller, or parkettes smaller than what's being proposed here. Candy Cane Park is a very small park, and it is part of the neighborhood and the culture of the neighborhood. Chris Stote was very articulate in saying, what really we're talking about here is culture. We've lived here, we breathe here, we work here, our children have been raised here. But with all that, it's development of the mindset of creativity and people coming together. With the built form also enhances that. But with all respect to that, people come together with issues and challenges within their own neighborhood. I'm supporting the motion. However, where I'm really interested in is to develop that park of Wallace Park into what we call a large neighborhood park that would have those amenities put forth. I understand the angst. I can remember way back when that wasn't even a park. It was mostly asphalt with chain swings and teeter-totters. So even with that park evolution, it really wasn't a park. It was almost like a hard surface playground. And I do agree with the 3 lots that are being allocated for the creative playground, which I understand is a temporary playground that can be moved. I went down with Councillor getting to look at it. In my professional opinion, in my background in the recreation field, there is sufficient property there to socialize, to supervise, and for the creative playground. Notwithstanding, I asked a question about the soccer pitch, which I have a conclusion on that one, and the basketball courts. I think there's opportunities for a basketball court and so forth to be transferred or to move to Wallace Park. That's why I asked earlier about the integrated process between the hospital site, Wallace Park, and Brantwood. You have some great synergies in front of you with respect to the development of this. And I'm hoping through the process that all of you will still be involved in how this comes about as a strong community. And so with that, I'll leave that, and I am supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Ogler.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. O'Meara. I guess my question would be of staff on this, and I'd like to know the timelines that we have for anything happening to these lots. Like, how long will the children be able to play? And the other question is, the park where the equipment is going to be moved to the area, what age group is that designed for?
Commissioner filling this, or Mr. Mark?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the playground would be catering to 4 to about 9 years old, 9 to 10 years old.
Okay, and will there be park benches in there for people like seniors or ordinary people just to walk around and sit down and have a coffee?
Absolutely, there will be benches there, yes.
So it's up to 9 years old is what this is designed for?
Yes.
Now, do we have any timeline of when something might happen to the existing property that we're talking about at Brantwood School?
I think we'd be looking at the middle of next year in terms of closing the sale on the property. And then it would be shortly after that.
Okay, so it'd be like summer of 2018?
Potentially.
Or the fall of 2018?
But more likely the fall, and when you actually see things happening.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I thank you. I'll be supporting the motion before us tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Question for staff, excuse me, to follow up on Councillor Elgar's question with respect to timing. Excuse me, just ingested that frog. The timing of the closure of this particular play area, can it be offset with the redesign of Wallace Park? Is that possible in terms of the current I guess, the current internal work plan, so that one can offset the other? The impact of one park could offset the other? I'm not sure how that would affect us from a financial point of view or from a planning point of view, but I'm just wondering if that's a potential opportunity.
Actually, before I get staff to respond on that, the clerk has notified me we are getting close to the for motion. Councillor Knoll, all in favor? So passes. And please continue. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd look to Chris Mark as well. But as I understand the process, it would be in 2018 we'd be looking at Wallace Park. So I think it would be a challenge to ensure that nothing happens with this, because you'd have to do the redesign of the campus of parks looking at Wallace Park. And then you would have to make the changes to Wallace Park. You'd have to go through the budget process in order to do that. So I would expect that you could see the loss of this playground space before we'd actually have something up into Wallace Park. In 19 or 20 for the Wallace Park, actually reconstruction.
To follow up on that yet again, is there any way to delay the closure of Brantwood? Sorry, I forgot the name of the school for a second. I can't believe I forgot the name of the school after tonight. Is there any possibility of delaying the closure of the park and maybe not advancing Wallace, but to delay delay the actual removal of the play space and put the sale of the lots off into the future? In keeping what former Councillor Stotz said tonight, we're not going to lose any money for sure by delaying the process.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we could potentially look at staggering the development of the lots along Douglas so that the northern ones were developed first and the others need to come later. We have in discussions been very concerned about the heritage building itself and looking for that to be an early part of the reconstruction, so we are ensured that yes, we get the heritage piece. So I think looking at that timing and perhaps some of the northern lots going first, there's a possibility for us to work that into the proposals.
Okay. I would simply ask that you report back on that in the future, assuming that this passes tonight. And
thank you,
Councillor O'Meara will be supporting the resolution that's been proposed by the mayor.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Grant?
And following on the shoulders of those before me, would it be possible for us to do a friendly amendment, perhaps, just to give some assurances to the community that perhaps we can stagger the construction of the homes on Brantwood? Well, it's not really a park, but in the Brantwood property, in order to align for a smooth transition to Wallace Park?
That would be a question for the mover, I believe.
I'd like to know if we can get some wording, I guess, from staff, and then if the mover would be.
It would be my opinion that the staff answer has given the necessary assurances of that. Amendments are always in order, but I don't think it's necessary in this case. I think we've gotten what we want on that front.
Okay, certainly. If it's on the record, then I'll stand by that and support the motion from the mayor.
So I'd ask if there are any other councillors who wish to speak before the mayor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my council colleagues for their support of the Southeast Oakville Community Centre and the additional features that are being included. For our newest council members, Hutchins, O'Meara, Lischina, and Councillor Chisholm, it was 5 years ago that we started this process and clarified the preliminary land use options for the hospital lands in Brantwood, Chisholm, and Lynbrook schools. At that time, council supported my request for additional space known as the parkette at the bottom end of the open space at Brantwood to accommodate the play structure and provide some play space. Now that we're at the final plans being formalized, we know that there will not be as much space, green space at the community center as many of us had believed and anticipated, and that with the development of Midtown at some point in the future with an additional 12,000 people, we're going to require additional green space for those 12,000 people that are going to call Midtown home. And with this in mind, I obviously am not able to support the motion, and I ask that you reconsider and defeat it as well, at which point I will make a motion to add one lot at this iconic property for enjoyment by today's residents, for the Charlies and the Peters and those that will be looking for green space in the future. The addition of one building lot doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a 33% increase for people in the area. Councillor Adams mentioned that, I believe you mentioned that we'll be looking for additional green space. Here's an ideal time to get it at a very good price. It's on sale when compared to 8 or 10 or 12 years down the road. So again, I am not able to support this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Hutchins.
Yes, I'm not able to support this motion either. I'm actually very disappointed that I was not able to put forward my motion. I was trying to get at least 2 lots to extend so that there was something that could be done for the Charlies of this world, that they could be throwing a ball while others were using the swings, the smaller children using the swings. It's in my opinion, the town is going to be built up in the next 20, 25 years. Intensification is going to be happening, and I disagree with Councillor Adams from the point of view of him saying that we shouldn't be buying up the spare school sites. If a community has been using the land as a recreational space, we should be buying up those spaces. We should be also with the full knowledge that if we have to sell them, we have to sell some. But at least if we sell half of them, we will more than pay for the rest. So, and we end up with more green space. So I don't understand the math that says it's going to cost $107 million to buy the lots. So we buy them and then we sell 50% of them. At least the community across Oakville then gets more green space or open space. So I will not be approving the motion to go forward with this, and like Councillor Gittings, I will be against it. But I do wish, and I will support, if our colleagues will defeat it, that if at least one lot be added to this, because this is too small to really allow for much play other than on the monkey bars and the swings and so on for very small kids. Brothers, sisters are sent out with small kids to go to the park. They have to do something while they're there. Why not give them enough space so that they can at least throw a ball around? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchins. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to the motion? Mayor Burton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am moving the motion because this seems like a very big crosstown issue. This is a piece of what would become a town-wide, therefore kind of a mayoral issue. And so I thought in my role as mayor, I would accept the challenge of being the one to move it. This project is the part of a completion of a vision that this council has unanimously shared, which is to create community centers in each ward of town. We are, I stress, adding green space in this neighborhood. I estimate that we are adding 3 acres of green space on the Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital site where none exists. And my math is that we have a net gain of 2 acres of green space here. We, in the course of the consultation over the use of the hospital lands, greatly reduced the number of housing units there by as much as a half against one of the models that we had out, and that had the benefit of allowing us to create over there 3 acres of green space. As a couple of councillors have mentioned, the thing that weighs most on my mind is I can't vote to do something for one street that I can't afford to vote for every street. And we have something like 10 or 11 streets that are faced with this very same issue. And this town has an annual tax levy of about $190 million, and $115 or $117 million is not a trivial figure. The debt service, that's repaying the principal and interest on $115 million, would add a significant tax increase to everybody's property. And I'm not sure that when it's budget time, people would be willing to stand up and say, yes, raise my taxes 3 or 4%. I don't see that happening. We will ensure that the park space, new and old, in the community will be configured to meet the needs of the community. It's, I think, it's clear enough to me that staff can manage the timing of the properties to be able to always have the nets available. And so, for those reasons, I have moved what I've moved. And before someone else does, I'll ask for a recorded vote.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Members of Council, you have the motion before you right now to move the 3 recommendations, 1, 2, and 3. Would all those in favor please rise? Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Meara. All those opposed, please rise. Councillor Hutchins and Councillor Giddings, the motion carries. Your Worship, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Council, we have until 10:30 because of the time that we allowed ourselves with that motion to go past the hour. And I am going to ask you, I believe we have delegations on board for item number 3, is that correct? Also for item number 4? No? So I'm going to see, but we also have for 5. And do we have delegations on number 6?
Yes.
All right. So, Council, are you satisfied with the material that you've been provided for item number 4? And if you are, is one of you willing to move it? Councillor Adams is moving it. Is there discussion or objection? We had no listed members of the public on this item, but just to be sure, anyone here with information to share with the town on item number 4? Item number 4 is the town-initiated official plan amendment for downtown Oakville growth area review. Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Where it's easy to black out at this hour, right? All right, Council. I think we need a 2-minute break. First, to help people leave without disrupting the meeting, and second, just to relieve the some emergency situations. So with that, I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. We'll be back here in 5 minutes, and we will do at least one of the remaining items. Thank you. Let the word go out. We are about to resume. If you're here for the agenda, please stay. If you're not, then as a friend of mine's father used to say, don't leave by inches.
Are we doing item 3? Is that what we're going to do? Item 3?
Yes. No. Did we do 4?
Yes.
Okay. So then we'll go.
Do 3.
Then
We have one delegation.
All right. So we have quorum. All right, I'm calling the meeting back to order. And the first order of business, considering the hour, is to ask Councillor O'Meara if he would like to move a motion to waive the procedure bylaw to allow him to move a motion to go past 10:30. Councillor O'Meara.
Unfortunately, would be breaking with my long-standing tradition of not doing that, so I would have to turn you down on that one, unfortunately.
All righty. Well, then that tells your friends that they can leave. All right? Unless anybody else wants to do it, Councillor Lischina.
I will move past 10:30. A motion to be able to move past 10:30.
So the first motion is to waive the procedure bylaw requires 9. All those in favor? Well, there's 3 of us. That was really close. You can go late tonight or you can go late tomorrow night. It's your choice. All right. You have Councillor Adams.
Your Worship, recognizing all the stuff that's on tomorrow's agenda too, we might need to poll for a 3rd night.
All righty. We'll do that. Why don't you all look in your calendars, and tomorrow night we'll pick a spill night. We don't need to do it now. We have one registered delegation for the Kerr Village Growth Area Review Town-Initiated Official Plan Amendment. And I think there's a chance that we could, in the 15 minutes remaining, we could accomplish that. Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegation?
The listed delegation.
Sorry, you have to hit your mic again. fumbled over here.
The listed delegation is Alidia Zimmerman. Sorry.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Hello? Hello? Yes? Okay, good. All right. Your Worship, councillors, Oakville staff. I'm a member, I live in the Kerr Village area. After all this, sorry, my notes got a little. And in December of 2015, we received a draft direction regarding the bonusing along Kerr Street. And as a result, we took up a petition which the town received in January of 2016, with about 80 names on it. The town has that. I'm sorry, my notes are. Okay, here we go. Okay, so on the petition, it said, we, the residents of Oakville, living primarily in the Kerr Village area, are strongly opposed to the bonusing of 2 additional building stories proposed for the residential intersections along Kerr Street. In particular, we were, at that point, they had the bonusing at the top and at the bottom of Kerr. And our area of concern is the top right here, primarily Prince Charles Drive and Stewart Street. The Kerr Village is a vibrant residential community with a diverse demographic ranging from seniors to young families to low-income housing at Margaret Drive. We believe that the town's proposal to develop Kerr Village as a vibrant business district by increasing densities at residential intersections along Kerr Street will compromise the integrity and the unique flavor of our community. We feel that the proposed increase in building heights will diminish the intersection sight lines, causing dangerous west-east crossing of young children walking back and forth to Oakwood Public School on Bartos and to the Kerr Street Ministries that's on the corner there. The increased density will also result in an additional vehicular traffic in an already congested area. We ask that the town remove the draft directive from their Kerr Village growth area review proposal.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions for the delegation? Thank you, ma'am, for your information. Are there other members of the public with information for council on this matter? Going once, going twice? I see none. I'm going to confine the matter to table, and I'm going to look for a motion. Councillor Duddock.
I would be pleased to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion? Shall I put to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk, what doesn't have a delegation? Does item 7, or no, did they leave? Did your friends leave? Sean? Yes. All right, so not 7. Well then, what's our delegation list for item number 6?
1.
Item number 6 is the Livable by Design Manual Part B, Draft Urban Design Direction Documents for Kerr Village Growth Area and Bronte Village Growth Area. Is there a listed delegation? If so, would you call the delegation?
The delegation is Shelley Thornborough, President of the Bronte Village Residents Association.
Ms. Thornborough? Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
No, that's number 6.
So if you want to go to the next slide, you can just hit the next. It's not the right one?
Oh, no, yeah.
Yes, right? So if you want to the next slide, you just hit the next slide.
Good evening, Your Worship, regional and town councillors, staff, and members of the community. Thank you for allowing us to delegate this evening on the Livable by Design draft recommendations for the Bronte Village Growth Area Review. The Livable Design addresses both Kerr and Bronte Village, but I am going to be talking to Bronte Village. The BVRA supports development with design, setback, built form and height that does not impair safety to communities, to the public, but complements existing area, culture, charm of the Bronte Village, embodying the following development principles, which are smart, responsible, sustainable, and community-centric, all of which have been embodied in the urban design principles that have been put forward in this document: sense of identity, compatibility, connectivity, sustainability, legacy, and creativity. We support the urban design principles that embrace many of the demographics with facets that lend to aging in place, community safety, health and wellness, families, and environmental sustainability. The majority of the design principles and features lend well to fostering street-level activity and maintaining the character of the lakeside village as outlined in the proposal. However, the proposal does include a maximum of 10 to 14 stories of height along the main street, accompanied by a setback after 3 stories of height, creating a tunnel concept along Lakeshore Road East, detracting from this village character, and the main themes of the waterfront park and harbor. And we strongly recommend reconsideration of these design elements. In particular, many of the other design principles and features lend well to the principles that we look for as a community, but certainly the height and the inadequate setback does tend to create this tunnel effect, limiting only 2 corridors of views to the waterfront, and lack of openness and increasing shadowing effect. And if I look at the design concepts that have been included in the proposal, you can see this sheer wall created along Lakeshore with 12 meters of sheer face going up before we get the vertical angle of 45 degrees, creating that setback. And this would be mirrored all the way down along Lakeshore. And you can actually see in the following slide that tunnel concept that's created by the comprehensive development that is proposed along Lakeshore Road West to the height proposed in this livable design plan. So we do urge members of council to reconsider, and the planning staff, these particular features within this proposal. All the other features lend well to connectivity and creating a vibrant public realm. However, the height and setback, creating this tunnel vision and limiting views to the central theme of the waterfront and the harbor are detracting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thornborough, for your information. Are there questions for Councillor O'Meara?
Sorry, thank you very much, Shelley, for coming. Just a quick clarification from staff. The BVRA mentioned the permissions of 10 to 14 stories. Are we increasing to 14 stories anywhere on the main street?
Through your worship to Councillor O'Meara, the design document in fact implements the policies within the Livable Oakville plan. So if the stories are identified as 10 and 14, and I'm speaking to most likely the Bronte Village Mall site as well as some of the bonusing sites, the design guidelines are simply implementing those policies, and the guidelines are using text and illustrations to show how development may occur or could occur within the district. But again, it's the policies within the official plan that provide that framework.
Okay, no, that's great.
But the important thing that I think you're trying to say, let me help, is that the design guidelines do not amend the official plan. There's no increase given by the design guidelines.
That's correct. The design document, in fact, implements the direction of the official plan.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? All right, thank you, Ms. Thornborough, for your information. I think you're at the point where you have to make a decision. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I was just going to move approval, Your Worship.
Councillor Robinson has moved the recommendation. Is there any discussion? Shall I put? I don't know. Is there another member of the public with information for council on this matter? Yes, Ann Sargent from the BIA. We only have 5 minutes, after which the carriage turns into a pumpkin and we don't vote.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff. Hadn't planned to speak. We have submitted our recommendations from the Bronte BIA, and staff have them. We note that our concerns have been taken into account on the most recent iteration of the recommendation. I'm just going to say one more time that we're a very small catchment area, we're very small boundaries, small population, and we have the lake on one side. So we don't have the opportunities to grow. We have such a small footprint, we can only go up. But to my esteemed colleague here, Shelley, we have members of the BVRA on our board as well, and we are not advocating for height and tunneling and something that would destroy the village. However, we have to advocate for our businesses. We're losing businesses. We have no suitable space for them to go. All of the space we have is too small. We're losing businesses to Burlington. We're losing businesses to other areas of Oakville and Port Credit. And we need to welcome development that's suitable and decide and look at applications and determine where that kind of density or where increased density is appropriate. And it depends on the type of application and the need. We're also losing Main Street commercial assessment eroding. So we are increasingly, we need more population, don't get me wrong. But we have to say, we have to fight for the business community, because without a vibrant business community, the taxes are going to fall on the backs of the residents. And if we don't have a vibrant business community, we're going to become the dead center of Oakville, and not in a good way. So that's, I appreciate the opportunity. One of our board members is here as well. I appreciate the opportunity to just come forth and reiterate our position.
Thank you, Ms. Sargent. To clarify, nothing in this matter before us has anything to do with height or how much height would be, what the growth would be. That's in the official plan. We passed that earlier this evening. This is the design guidelines only. So thank you very much for taking the opportunity to share that with us. I'll now confine it to table, and Councillor Robinson has moved the motion.
No, just a minute. Your Worship, Ann just spoke to item 5. That's what she spoke to.
No.
I think so.
Item 6 is before us. Anyway,
all right.
In 1 minute, there'll be no vote. We're at the end of the clock.
I'll move we approve item 5.
You already did. I've just been seeking permission to call the vote.
Okay.
Not 5, 6. He said 5 again.
Okay, the clerk and I are clear. This is a vote on item number 6. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. You've made it to 10:30, just under the wire, and we are recessed until tomorrow night. Please bring your third night nominations to the meeting.
But he does.
No, he doesn't.
Ralph thinks he moved item 5, I think.
We'll do it again tomorrow. How about that? I will be regrets for the first part of the meeting tomorrow, and we'll attend. Yeah, because I'm running the budget on that, so I'll attend as soon as I can.
Okay.
Depending on who shows up.